So you're good.
Who's going to be listening? Anyway.
It's just recording it.
This is essentially the recording of the work session stuff like we would have done over in the city hall had that been an option.
So that gets put out. It was one.
Yep.
I just want to be sure.
Right.
This meeting generates a lot of attention. I'm sure.
Perfect. Ready to go. Thank you. Would you like to kick it off?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the May 16, 2022 work session of the Pinehurst Village Council for the purpose of reviewing the fiscal 23 budget. We have all senior staff plus all the village council, councilors from the village hall, and we expect to be meeting on this for the next couple of hours. We have an outline and an agenda that's available. I think everybody in the room has that or has access to it. I'll ask Jeff Sanborn to begin the meeting, or you want me to go straight to Matt? And,
I think we'll just go straight to Brooke and Matt.
okay, fine enough. Matt, go ahead and introduce yourself to our live stream and go forward. Thank you, Brooke. Same to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Matt McCarahan. I am the Organizational Performance Director.
I'm Brooke Hunter, the Financial Services Director.
And I get the privilege of kicking us off today. And then after a few minutes of chatting with you all, I get to turn over to Brooke for all the fun meeting conversations. So as John, as you just mentioned, you all have received an agenda, it's an abbreviated agenda for today. And what I'm really going to be focusing on for this part of the conversation is number 2. So we're going to be talking about those strategic priority sections. And so many of you know, we've been working quite a while, since November of 2021, on setting the stage to various retreats and conversations to get to this point that we're currently at. And so if you can, please go ahead and turn to page 37, which is right behind the strategic priorities tab. And while you do that, I'll say that for this meeting, Brooke and I are going to be the lead facilitators of the conversation. However, that does not mean that if village management, if anyone has any questions or any clarifying elements, please let us know. Same to you all. If you all have any questions for us or for anyone in the room, please by all means let me know or let Brooke know. We're happy to answer those questions at that time. I think it'd be easier to answer them in real time than maybe if you would like to save them for later. So I'm starting on page 37. I'm just going to walk us through this section to kind of set the stage for the conversation today. And hopefully this is not new. This is our strategic planning process, starting with our FY23 balanced scorecard goals, of which there are 9. And as a reminder, the balanced scorecard is made up of 4 main sections, which is our customer, our internal section, our workforce, and then our financial. And like I said, out of those 4 categories, there are 9 goals that through our strategic planning process and our retreats, we have talked through. On page 38, this really sets the stage for the entire outline for where we've come from to where we are currently and what we get to look forward to over the next couple of months. So as a reminder, the strategic planning process started in November. That was a senior leaders meeting where we got together as senior leaders to talk about where we are, what trends may exist, what data may be necessary for further conversations. And then from there, we moved into we took that information, we looked at it, we looked again at those long-term trends, those environmental scans. And then we took that information and met at the beginning of December to have a pre-retreat with you all, Village Council, to talk through again what we found within our environmental scans, what our surveys were looking like, our community and our business surveys, what certain trends that we may be looking at, as well as what things may be on the horizon that you need to be aware of before making decisions for FY23. Then about mid-December, we met for a 2-day retreat. That was the actual kicking off of the Village Council retreat, where we talked through the goals, the objectives. We talked through making sure that we identified different areas of focus for the year. We talked through whether or not we needed to affirm our different core competencies, our mission, our vision, our values. And then we also showed at that time, strategic opportunities, right? We talked through where we mapped out potentially where our opportunities may exist, where our challenges may exist, et cetera. And from there, we use that information to really decide on where we were going to be for our, again, areas of focus and our strategic objectives. Now, using all that input and starting in January, and I'll jump ahead a little bit here on page 39, you actually can see at the bottom of the page a little bit of the guidance here. January is where we actually identify those areas of focus and we set target levels for the balanced scorecard. So we took that information, you all agreed during the retreat what our areas of focus may be. We took that information, looked at the balanced scorecard, and then we brought you all in January to a council meeting, that balanced scorecard for your approval, in which you all approved. Now, while we're looking at that, we started to look at, again, goals, objectives, what our performance levels look like. We also looked at initiative action plan items. And as a reminder, our initiative action plan items, we look at both. And we have something called initiative action plan items, and we have OPIs. So initiative action plans tend to be those large scale projects or initiatives that usually take money, like large financial resources, staff time resources, cross-departmental, et cetera. And in this one, as we go through it, you're going to see quite a bit of cross-pollination with our areas of focus. And then on top of that, we did have conversations around other opportunities for improvements, which fall within three main categories, which are projects, projects, evaluations, and IAPs. Right? So again, we talked about IAPs, and then the other two are projects and evaluations. We're going to go into a little bit more detail of that in a minute. So now, as you can see on page 39, we provide for you here the 5-year financial forecast for FY23 through 27. And I know we're going to talk through this a little bit more, Brooke, so I'm not going to delve too deep on it now. You could ask me questions, but she's the one that's going to be able to answer those questions much better than I can. So starting on page 40, actually, I apologize. If I may go back real quick, just for page 39, I don't want to say, right now we're presenting the strategic operating plan to council. We did that last week to you all. Now we're meeting for the first, budget work session in June. If all things go well, then we'll be looking at asking you all for approval of the strategic operating plan and then implementing it July 1st. So now we'll flip the page. So when we're looking at the strategic operating plan, what did we actually use to put into the decision-making, the conversations around the creation and implementation of this document? So again, we talked through the mission, vision, and values. We affirmed what that was for FY23, and we did some tweaking this year on the core competencies. Again, just some minor tweaks, but the three that we have are the systematic approach to continuous improvement, the engagement of volunteers, and then finally, leveraging technology. And we also identify strategic challenges and opportunities through this process. And I'm happy to read through them if you would like, but I can, again, these are they're here for your review as well. We identified 6 through strategic challenges, and we identified 12 opportunities going into FY23. So any questions, everything, or anyone would like for me to read those, please let me know.
I think we're all right.
All right.
Go ahead.
We also looked at strategic advantages. And for FY23, we identified 6, which are integrating an extensive use of technology, that culture of continuous improvement, our customer-focused workforce, again, the strong financial condition, integrated strategy planning processes, and last but certainly not least, especially to me, a robust performance management system. We also looked at a SOAR analysis, which is a strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results analysis. We did that during the pre-retreat meeting and then used that throughout the conversation. And then, as I mentioned before, our environmental scan documents that help to walk us through, actually starting in November all the way up into January. And now,
Can I have a question?
yes, sir.
Define a little bit more the environmental scan.
Yes, so the environmental scan was the section of the document where we looked at both local and local, state level, national trends. We looked at what potential areas may be of interest for us within the village, and areas that we may need to be mindful of. So when we're looking at truly the environment in which we may be looking at for FY23, that was the deeper data dive that we took at that time. So when we're looking at potential population growth or trend analysis for home prices, et cetera, that was that environmental scan that we were looking at.
I got it. Thank you.
We also looked at, just for the purposes of people listening at home, our business, our community, business and residential surveys are part of that environmental scan, as well as workforce analysis, et cetera. And then at the bottom of page 41, we did talk through our strategic goals, objectives, and performance indicators. I'm not going to go incredibly deep into this section here, but I just wanted to point out that one of the areas that we really focus on when we're looking at our goals, objectives, and key performance indicators are where we are at, where we have been, and then also where we are in relation to other communities and where we are when it comes to other organizations as a whole. So for 42, we can, page 42 is actually where we can see a little bit deeper into that. And this is the balanced scorecard as approved in January by you all. Again, we have 9 goals this year. You can see how the strategic objective that was identified during the retreat aligns with each goal. And then the KPIs that are associated with that. And basically what, in a way of looking at this, is how are we going to keep ourselves accountable, right? So by the goal is what we intend to do, the strategic objective is how we will do it. And then the KPI description is essentially, how do we know? How do we know, did we achieve that goal? How do we know if we need to improve or course correct? And then next, if we continue to flip on page 44, as I mentioned earlier, during the conversations, there are certain projects or opportunities for improvement that I've identified through village council conversations or through our departmental budget conversations that rise up to the level of an IAP or an initiative action plan. There is a minor typo in your document. We're going to make sure it's fixed going into the final document, but there are 7 that are identified for FY23 through 27, of which 5 are identified within the areas of focus. And so on the left-hand side, you can see that there are 3 areas that are highlighted in red that have AOF after it. That's areas of focus. Those are for 2030, manage development to protect village character, support the business community, and then provide a safe and effective multimodal transportation system. The 5 that are identified with those, I'll just start with managed development to protect village character, is to update the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. This is a carryover. We've seen that one before. The small area plans for village council, I apologize, for Village Place, Rattlesnake Trail Corridor, and Pinehurst South / Highway 5 commercial area that is scheduled to be completed going just over into FY23. So we pulled that forward a little bit. And finally, the relocation of the public services complex to allow for redevelopment of Village Place. That one's an FY23 through 25 IAP. Yes, sir.
I just want to go back you quickly before I.
Yes, sir. So sorry.
Some notes here. And I raised this before, and I'm just going to raise it again. I've heard the answer. I understand the connection to the balanced scorecard, but I still have a healthy skepticism when we are setting the long-term goals that are less than what we actually achieve on these balanced scorecard categories. Mm-hmm. With the exception of 4.1 and 5.1 and 5.3, where we seem to have a stretch goal, which would certainly make sense. Almost every other one, there's a few others, but most other ones are sort of our long-term goals seem to be less than what we're actually achieving. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand in the balanced scorecard world, there's some method to that madness, but I've experienced this before in other.
Yeah, what page you referring to?
I'm looking at page 42.
You're 42.
Yeah. I mean, like we have percentage of residents satisfied with fire services is 100%. That's fantastic. Congratulations. But we're setting our long-term goal for FY 27 at 95%. Now, you know, I don't think many people do that themselves in their lives or when they set goals. They're, you know, you're constantly trying to improve. It's tough to hit 100% every year. I'm not trying to put, you know, hoist that on anyone's shoulders, but I'm just saying there are other examples where we, you know, we're at 99 now, but we're saying in 6 years, we'll be at 95. That's our goal on police service. So again,
I think the staff's position is, we're not hard over on this, whatever the council wants to do in this case is okay with us, but the way we viewed this question in the past is that the margin of error is 4%.
okay,
Every year, for any one of these results, so are we gonna be dissatisfied if the result comes back next year and it's plus or minus the margin of error? We're kind of splitting hairs.
yeah,
I think in some other instances also, we've used these as thresholds by which we do not want to fall below.
below.
So that becomes a red flag. If we hit that number or below, we better start looking at what's going on. We've used it in that manner as well. Rightly or wrongly.
Jeff, also, if we have a high goal and that means we are going to pour resources into achieving that goal. So we would be aiming for 99% or 100%, where with the margin of error, if you keep it within that margin of error, then you're not going to be throwing resources to achieve perfection. Does that make sense? The
Yeah, I
way-
think we've tried to throw our resources at the items where we're seeing performance not meet our desires and our expectations.
And if your expectation is 100%, and you see you're coming in at 96, that means 4%, we better throw resources there. So
Yeah.
that's the way it's been explained to me, that if you create this unrealistic expectation, then you're gonna throw resources to that number.
I agree with not creating unrealistic expectations. What's confusing to the eye is that we're basing this off our actual, not an expectation. So when we say 100% in that particular category, which is, again, great news, do our constituents think that if in our goal in 5 years, well, 6 years from FY 21 to 27 is 95%, even though we just looked through 100%, I think the average citizen would say, well, how did you come up with that? Now, the margin of error is a plausible explanation to citizens as we talk to them, but I think it's just confusing. I don't think people set their own personal goals in life like that, and I think a lot of organizations don't set it like that. But it's nothing that I want to, you know, flip over the chessboard over. I just, every time I see this, I just reach the same conclusion in my mind.
There's another, I understand why that's counterintuitive or
It is
creates
counter.
an image.
Right,
But another way to look at this, I think, is this is in line with what Jeff said, but 95 is a darn good result.
very good result.
And in reality, would we do anything different if we hit 95 than if we hit 100 without having knowledge that we were 100 the year before? Probably not, because we say that's a darn good result. So in other words, we wouldn't pour more resources into it. So
Stick with what's working.
it's working, yeah. Again, I understand why that's perplexing, but
Okay.
we can go either way on it.
And I don't have any other questions. I just wanted to see what you mentioned.
I'm just-
Yeah, I get the margin of error. I don't- And then there are some categories where we have, the one that jumps out right away is 4.1, where we're actual at 67%.
Yeah.
And our goal is to move up 8%
Right.
to 75. Sounds like a realistic goal. We're not trying to go from 67 to 95. We're just going from 67 to 75. Okay, realistic, good goal, you know,
And we're applying resources.
To try to do that.
that.
okay.
And anticipate just a one extra note is anytime that we have a resident satisfaction number or a community satisfaction number that is 95% or higher, we
Yes.
tend to keep that at 95%. So because of that margin variance, so at least there is consistency across the board to, so you won't see one resident satisfaction number at 99%, another one's at 95. We kind of peg that to be consistent across.
No, I do notice that, nothing goes outside, so the margin of error is your backstop,
Mhm.
looks like,
Yes.
okay. That's all, right. Thank you.
So, good question, thank you. Again, on page 44. And as I mentioned, we have 7 IEPs that are part of FY 23 through 27, 5 of which will be conducted in FY 23. The ones that are remaining, just to finish up on that, and under area of focus for support the business community, we have to expand downtown parking facilities, which is scheduled to be starting in 24 through FY 27. And then we have under provide a safe and effective multimodal transportation system to develop a consolidated multimodal transportation plan scheduled for FY 24 through 25. Then we have the retrofit current athletic fields with synthetic turf, which falls under goal 6, and the opportunity or the objective to provide recreation programs and facilities, which will be kicked off starting in FY 23 and will go through FY 27. And again, we'll go in a little more detail on that. And then the last one, again, certainly not least, under provide library and archive services to expand and renovate the given library and Tufts archives, kicking off in 23, going through 27. And so in total, FY 23 funding for IEPs is approximately 1.6 million or 1,587,000. And FY 23 through 27 funding is approximately 9 million. So in addition, yes.
Just one question, and I don't expect a full answer right now, but for several years, we've been talking about a consolidated multimodal transportation plan.
Mhm.
What does that look like? And like I said, I don't want an answer right now. I think it's something we have to talk about, but we've talked about it for so long. I don't even know what it looks like. Does it look like a small area plan? Does it look like maps and what, so at some point, it'd be great to have agree it needs to be done, but what is it? So just.
It means that you have to drive to Sanford to turn back.
So anyway, that's probably a daring question, but
That's a good point. No, I agree. That's a good question. And let me take one step. I think multimodal, when we talked about this in December, is everything except cars. Am I right?
It includes cars.
It includes
All forms of transportation.
Okay, all right. So we got
Walking.
bikes, we have golf carts, we have cars, we have trucks, we have walking, the whole shebang, right?
Recognizing that there's not a lot we can do with regard to cars.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so it probably won't be a big component of this plan, other than understanding how the other modes of transportation need to interrelate with the car problem.
does it come in a notebook?
No, it comes in the actual plan. I'll send you some examples.
Really? Oh,
Yeah, the
Yeah.
other has a really good.
That'd be good, thank you.
That'd be helpful.
thank you.
We got that right, Matt?
So sorry,
That works.
that works.
We got that. Thanks for asking that. That's a good question.
So in addition to these IAPs, as I mentioned before briefly, we do have other opportunities for improvements that could be projects or evaluations that tend to fall at the departmental level. And for FY 23 through 27, we have approximately 45 projects that have been identified and 26 evaluations. Now, on page 45, it kind of goes now into our performance, our process and performance improvement section. I'll quickly run down what we use here as well. So we tend, well, we are a high performing organization, and so we tend to make sure that before we act on anything, we want to make sure that we are doing so appropriately, and we do so by checking through our performance improvement opportunities. There are 2 that we're going to identify right now. Usually tend to be what we call birdies or aces, and I will say being, still, this is my first process going through here with you all. It always was one of my favorite things when I got onboarded to talk about birdies and aces. I was like truly in the village of Pinehurst. So as you can see, birdies and aces are our different ways of doing a plan, do, check, act cycle. So some of you all may have heard the process improvement mindset of plan, do, check, and act. We've created that here. The first one is birdie. And then that's more of our in-depth analysis of key processes. It tends to be a larger organization-wide, maybe potentially multiple departments, or a large shift. We use the 6-step process. And then we have the other one, which is called an ACE, which stands for Analyze, Change, and Evaluate. And that's a 3-step PDCA, or Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. And that's usually for those rapid improvement cycles. So something that if I were identifying something that tends to happen in less than 6 months. Birdies tend to be ones that are more than 6 months. So for for this 5-year plan, we have 1 birdie planned, and we have 5 aces. So as you saw last week, the birdie is looking at the document imaging process. And then on page 45, you can actually see the 5 identified aces that we're looking at, most of which are going to be in FY23, and then 1 for FY24.
Actually, the question, how do employee timekeeping kept now? It's not automated?
It's in an Excel spreadsheet. Their Excel spreadsheets printed, signed, and passed to the respective supervisor.
Gotcha.
So for the purposes of this, and so that I can turn it over to Brooke to really get us kicked off, I'm not going to go through the rest of these pages here, but I will tell you that behind this page goes into our key performance indicators by goal. And so what you'll see on those pages are our different key performance indicators, again, that align to each goal, but then also charts and a narrative that relates to each. And where applicable, we provide either the ETC benchmark information or we provide a comp. Now, for the purposes of this document, we don't identify what those comps are, but they are a benchmark community that we have identified through our processes.
They're high performers.
They're high performance, yes, sir. And so for that reason, I implore you, perhaps not during the meeting today while Brooke is chatting, but if you haven't had a chance to look through them, please feel free to, and let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to talk more about.
What's the Direction Finder survey?
So the Direction Finder survey is the ETC survey that we use. ETC Institute runs our community survey.
And didn't we change a few years ago to start comparing ourselves to the different communities? It didn't used to compare ourselves to it was just a general base, and then we became more focused.
We asked them for last year's survey to not only tell us where we fell with respect to southeastern US averages and US averages, but to tell us how we compared with the top performers.
That's what I was thinking about. And so this reflects that request?
In some cases, some of these comps might be from that list.
So
Okay, I remember making that change.
yeah, so we have received the leading, it's called the Leading the Way Award that ETC Institute provides. And so we have a benchmark data where applicable for that as well.
As we're making the shift from that to Brooke, I guess, I'd like the council members to suggest, if you are prepared at this time, what are the particular parts of the budget and the discussion, which is all laid out for us? Is the most important to you, or do you have particular questions? In my case, I think maybe some others, the whole issue of the fund balance, all that's working, I think will be critical to what I want to make sure we have today. And but are there other areas, particular areas of focus that anybody else has? We just emphasize now, so when we get to those points, we make sure we have plenty of time for that. Anything else off your head?
Artificial turf, and I say that because of public comment, questions that have been raised, observations. So it's very well.
We'll get to that. Mark's already put some stuff up today, actually.
Yeah.
So, too. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah. Pat? Any? Pat?
Yeah, no, I want to thank staff. I'd asked for some a couple of different scenarios versus whether we continue to maintain our 0.31 tax rate through 2027, what it would look like regarding our five-year financial forecast. Obviously, I just got it. Thank you, and I'll have some questions when we get to it. And then I also had asked for the one we removed the carriage house parking facility from it, and what that impact would be. And so those two things are important to me. What you mentioned, or what Lydia brought up the other day in email traffic was a new issue that I'm interested in hearing to his advice. I did see Mark had sent a few items. I did not read them thoroughly, so I'm looking for a discussion. And otherwise, we'll get to the public service complex later on, but those are the ones.
Jeff or Jane, anything?
Just talk about the fund again.
Sorry,
The fund, and also in reference to the inflation rate that we have.
inflation issue.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
John, a small thing that came up in BPAC last week, is that BPAC was wondering if we would consider raising the amount allocated to walkways above 400,000. It's been that amount for several years. And they thought that would be appropriate now that the public seems to be more willing to accept walkways and skyrocketing costs, that perhaps that number should be high.
Good.
Thank you all. Get to turn over to Brooke now.
Perfect. Yes, I will make a point to touch on these items, but as we get through there, if you want to call specific attention, just please interrupt me and we'll speak up. If you'll speak up, we'll be sure to cover those for you. The next item on the agenda is to talk through the overview of the proposed fiscal year 2023 general fund budget. So if you will, please turn your book to the general fund tab on page 69, where this begins. We'll start with the general fund itself, and we'll cover the high level information about revenues and expenditures that are located within this fund. As you know, this is one of the primary funds that we operate out of on a daily basis here at the village. I will have you go ahead and turn the page to 70 and 71. These two facing pages, they show a quick snapshot of the total revenues on the left and the total expenditures on the right. You'll notice that the total revenues and total expenditures match, they agree, and that is required under North Carolina general statute that municipalities adopt a balanced budget. So that's what that means. The revenues have to equal expenditures. Our total general fund budget for fiscal year 23 is $27,099,100. You'll see that it's about 6% higher than the amended fiscal year 2022 budget at December 31st. If you look over on the left-hand side here, you see the major categories of revenues by type. So the largest piece of that in the pie chart below are ad valorem taxes. You'll see 45% of total revenue, but that does include other financing sources, which Jane, you mentioned at the presentation last week, how other financing sources, that number is skewing the percentage a little bit this year. So what we've done, if you look in the packet that was handed out to you, so the first page behind your agenda, if you'll turn to that really quickly, please, you'll see some history, starting with fiscal year 2019, just to see what is the trend of total ad valorem tax revenue to total operating revenue. So this backs out the effect of all other financing sources, eliminates that effect. So you can see in fiscal year 29, our original budget was at 56%. It ended at 54% of total revenues that were received. In 2020, it was 54% for budget and actual. In fiscal year 21, original budget was at 58%. We ended the year at 54%. The original budget for fiscal year 22 is 57%. And fiscal year 23, the one we're talking about now, is at 53%. So you see the trend line there. Overall, one key takeaway is it's pretty comparable. We are relying heavily on the local option sales tax revenue because it's a valid revenue source that we are receiving. But that just shows some historical information, because I know Jane brought up a good point. I hope that shows a little bit with the effect without other financing sources, which does skew the picture a little bit. So that's just for your information, is all that spreadsheet is for. Then the next category, so that's 45% of total. The next category are the unrestricted intergovernmental revenues. The main item that falls in here are your sales tax revenue. That's the largest piece, and related hold harmless reimbursements associated with that. Also, some other smaller state collective revenues are there. We'll get into more detail here in a minute with those items. Then the next category at 2% is restricted intergovernmental. That's where Powell bill falls into place. We have permits and fees together at about 3%. Sales and services are about 3% of the total budget, and other revenues are at 2%. And other financing sources this year is an anomaly at 16%. Those other financing sources, those are the ARP funds that are being transferred into the general fund from the American Rescue Plan Act Special Revenue Fund. So that's the transfer in. Then on the right side over here, your expenditures, this is a snapshot of the expenditures by function. And so this is categorized by combining departments that perform a similar function or similar task. For example, our public safety function, for example, is police department, fire department, and inspections. They all are working toward the same goal to provide public safety. And so that is how these are categorized. You'll see the breakdown below in the pie chart. Public safety accounts for 33% of total expenditures for the year. That's very comparable to previous years. It may actually be the exact same percentage as last year, I think. Cultural and recreation is now the second largest. That is 23%. That does include the library as well. So it includes a full year of operations for the library for the first time. Then transportation at 19%. And that's all of our streets and grounds function, Powell bill, paving, street resurfacing, things like that. Then the next largest would be general government at 12%. That's the admin, HR, finance. Environmental protection is at 9%. That is your solid waste department. And then economic and physical development is the remaining 4.
In the cultural recreation, that's the library now, plus all of PNR.
Yes, it is.
Just those two things.
If you'll flip the page, you'll see all the details. Then you can see all those departments. If you will, let's go ahead and turn the page real quick so you can see this. So you see it presented at function level, and then we summarize it in that way. So you can see exactly which departments fall under each category. So up at the top, we have expenditures by type. So that breaks it down by salaries and benefits, your operating expenditures, which would be any other operating costs except salaries and benefits. That's departmental supplies, contracted services, maintenance agreements, repair and maintenance, anything like that falls into that category. And then your capital line here is anything that reaches the capitalization threshold and capitalization requirements. Debt service, you see we have a $0 amount in that line for this year as well, because we have paid off all outstanding debt. Other financing uses would be any transfers out to other funds, and we don't have any of those this year.
Brooke, on the 2 lines that have shown a decline, the percentage change, I guess what we see, total general government, our costs have gone down versus the budgeted.
Yes.
Okay, and any particular reason, just filling spots, or is it?
There are usually particular items in here. So for example, administration is going from 1.8 million down to 1.7. Included in the 1.8 was the village hall office expansion. And so that's a capital item that wouldn't recur in the next year. So that's
So
often
one time, yeah.
exactly. That's often what's causing those.
And in the economic and physical development one, what's causing that 15.2%?
It's going to be the funding for the PDO rewrite is this year. In fiscal year 22, there's $200,000, I believe it is there. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. It's in fiscal year 22. So we're going to roll forward those funds. We won't be.
That's, I see, that's the plan. That falls on, I didn't notice the line there. It's
Right,
planning.
planning,
Okay.
exactly. That's the primary piece there.
And the one thing in the cultural and recreation category was the harness track. And why, what's made that happen like that over?
I think it was a lot of capital, wasn't it, Mark? We had several capital projects in the harness track in fiscal year 22.
16%.
And we do not have as many capital in 23, is that
Not as
right?
many, that's correct.
That's the largest,
Depending on contractor quotes, we may end up having to roll forward
right,
some into the summer, but
right. I'm pretty sure they're capital related, if you compare, I could certainly get you that exact.
No,
number.
that's reasonable. I understand. Thank you.
It's largely capital related, that's normally the source behind why those would decrease. You can also delve even deeper, we will not, but you have that option in your book. Right behind some of this information, you can see the department by department level information, and it breaks it down by type. So you can see salaries and benefits per department. You can see the operating and capital. That way you can compare year over year to see at least which type it's in, which will probably point you in the right direction of what the cause is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, sure. Perfect, okay. Any questions about the different views of expenditures? We have those 3 different ways to view it in summary form. If you will turn, if not, then if you'll turn with me to page 77. Here is the page about fund balance. So all of those revenues that you saw on the left-hand side and all the expenditures that are programmed in on the right, which we'll talk about in additional detail in just a moment, would result in an estimated ending fund balance of 14.9% or 14.9 million, which equates to 54.9% of expenditures. You can see in this chart on page 77 that we are estimating an increase in fund balance of 1.76 million for the fiscal year. And that is due to the transfer of those ARPA funds that are going to be coming in to the village or coming into the general fund budget. A lot of those ARP funds will be expended. We have plans for those to be expended in a couple years in the 5-year plan. For the library expansion and the potential parking structure and things like that.
Can you remind us, how many years is that money? Is that 2-year money, 5-year money? Money?
The ARPA money.
Yeah.
So in terms of how often do we get it?
No, what's our
What do we
line?
have to spend?
Yeah.
Our plan is to spend it in fiscal year 23, if at all possible, expend it all, and then it would free up those dollars for us to spend at a later date if needed. Because of the way that we are recommending that we report the use of these funds, which is coming from guidance from the School of Government and other state organizations as well. If we utilize it for those salaries and benefits component, then it frees up those dollars for us to
I think
basically leave in the general fund.
But does the federal government require us to expend it within 3 years?
We do have to spend it on, even if we use it for salaries and benefits, we would have to appropriate it by December of 2024.
2020.
And then expend it by 2026. But that would be a bigger issue if we had like a big capital project or something is what that would be. You enter into a contract that you have to spend the dollars. before.
Obligated, yeah.
And we'll have
Exactly.
it all spent by 2023.
Yeah, our goal is to have it all in 2023. That way we have the
Calendar year
freedom. That's right. That's right.
We don't have to worry about.
That's right. Then we have the freedom to, do with it as council desires. That's right.
Thank you.
So really, we need to spend the 5.2 million as soon as possible. Because it frees up, then we are allowed to.
To use it flexibly, yeah.
Right, but we really need to spend the ARPA money. before we
Exactly.
can use the rest of it, use the money we would have spent otherwise.
Recycle it.
What assures us that we can spend it is on our operating expenses.
Correct.
That's the most
Correct.
certain, but yeah.
Correct.
That's exactly right.
I like it. I mean, it seems like a very proactive, thoughtful way to do that.
Thank you.
I have a question, it's probably for Mike Atkins. The 355 for storm drainage projects. Do we know how much we anticipate spending in total on storm drainage projects?
For next year or for this year or?
Forever.
Forever?
Well, I mean, we're doing the stormwater master plan,
Right.
and that will take us to where we need to spend how much?
I think we put, correct me if I'm wrong, like 400,000 every year going out for the 5-year plan. I think we've got 355 next year. And we kind of,
Right.
and that's really based on historical numbers on what we could spend. One of the things we look to get out of the plan is whether or not those numbers are, what we've been spending is the correct amount. Don't have that information correct right now, but I think we have 400,000 per year in the next 5 years. out.
Yeah, we have 370,000 on the capital side, but I believe there is another 30, if
That's
I'm not
right.
mistaken, on the operating side for smaller projects, so a total of 400,000. For thereabouts.
We could have some named projects that could exceed that in any one year coming up, once we get the stormwater master plan back.
Sure.
And there's some potential longer drainage basins that might need to be addressed.
Well, I
Could be
think I'm
looking
asking
at
the question, as a struggle with the turf. I thought, well, and I'll get my reasons later, but I thought.
Starting with the turf, the idea, of artificial turf for one field.
Yeah, and I thought, okay, let's assume, not saying we're gonna do it, but if we took that off the table, where could we spend that money? And stormwater, that's been such a huge issue, I consider maybe, is that a viable alternative to just throwing it out there? I'm not saying that's the way to go, but I was thinking of other ways to possibly spend that money. Okay, thank you.
Or we could not spend it.
We always not spending it, but yes.
I think we'll get into that conversation about this turf, but one of the things that's driving that consideration is capacity,
Oh, I know.
field space capacity, so
I know.
there's where you can spend it.
But we
You wanna
do-
build the
but-
fields.
Along Lydia's thought process, I think, is that we know that the stormwater management plan will require X amount over a year, because we thought that out. So it's not a hunch, it's a.
Well,
guess.
At this point, it's still a guess.
This
We don't have the plan.
Until we get that.
It's a
number.
right, but
Yeah,
it's a good, yeah, I mean, educating it.
Okay,
I want to plant a seed. It's been in my queue of emails to send over the last couple of days, but I haven't done it yet, but I will. Anybody remember reading the editorial of the Pilot last Wednesday?
about,
They talked about the county and other parts of the state being involved in very long-term water planning and stormwater planning for the area. And what I just wanted to put forward, and I'll send this message out to us, is that to whatever degree we can, we should be trying, I think, to coordinate our efforts globally with whatever is starting to happen around the county according to this plan. And it was written up quite surprising. I was reading this editorial on the Pilot. It's not something they often read about. But anyway, there's an idea there that may have some way to work its way into the study that we're doing in our own plans here. So I'll send that around, but it's long range and it's stormwater, and we all know we need help with that. Thank you.
Perfect. I also want to mention too, on this page related to fund balance, this does take into account our budget to actual variance as well. I just want to make note of that. You all are aware of our budget actual variance. We mention it often, but that is the assumption that revenues will come in at 101% of budget, and operating expenditures will fall or come in at 93%. So there's a 7% variance on that side. And so we do factor that into our calculation and our projections for the 5 years as well. And we'll get to that when we flip over to the 5-year forecast in a few minutes. But we do take that into account to try to get a more accurate representation of where we actually think fund balance will land, not what the budget dollars say, because we know there's going to be a variance of some kind. Okay, great. If there are no questions on that, let's go ahead and turn the page to page 79, and we'll get started on some of the key revenues. I will not go through all the details of every revenue source, but if you have specific questions, feel free to jump in and ask those. So we'll talk through ad valorem taxes first. Those are property taxes. Our property taxes are budgeted at $12,176,000 for the year. That's down about 34,000 or 0.3% from the previous year. And as you know, it's because of the proposal to adopt a tax rate of 31 cents, which is a 0.5 cent decrease from fiscal year 22. And so the part of the growth made up for part of that reduction, which is why you're not seeing as drastic of a decrease. This decrease is possible after evaluating our projected local option sales tax revenue projections and consulting with the League of Municipalities estimates that they provide. We often get asked, well, what does 1 penny on the tax rate equal? And so I'll share that with you. 1 penny on the tax rate equals about $386,000 for this year. Our estimated growth that has been factored into this assumption is 1.24% on the real property valuation. That's based on a prior year construction patterns that we have observed. Also, an estimated growth of 1% in motor vehicle valuation. That one fluctuates year over year, but we're just estimating 1% increase this year. Our estimated tax collection rates are 99.9% for real and personal property and 100% for motor vehicles. And that is indicative of actual results that we have seen over the past several years. This is actually a little more on the conservative side. We typically exceed 99.9%.
As long as you've been doing this and the economy is up and down, do you ever see in your revenue assumptions, I can't say ever, but in the past, have you seen fluctuations that surprised us? Just not in what.
Well, I don't know if surprise is the right word, but more recently, the whole COVID impact. Remember, we budgeted 2 years ago, thinking that it was going to be very bad. So we backed way off on our local option sales tax projections, and it came in way higher. It came in higher than the previous year rather than lower.
Well, the reason I ask, like, again, you guys have been doing this for so long and you monitor it so closely. But in the past, do things happen that surprise you and you go, well, right now we are in a climate that looks kind of like back here. So some of these might be surprises.
Right. We do recall during the COVID discussion, we reviewed some of our property tax collection rates from previous recessions as well. Because we said, do we need to reduce our tax collection rate assumption for that previous year? And at that time, we reviewed historical percentage collections, and they were still high even in a year of downturn, even in a year of recession. And so we do go back and review. Another example of something we review historical performance on is years opens, US opens related to sales tax. We look at historical information of how does that impact our sales tax revenue? What do we need to project for this upcoming US open? And so we maintain a lot of historical data that we review in spreadsheet format during our budget review committee work sessions or meetings that we have. So we do monitor a lot of that fluctuation.
Well, the great news is this period, quarterly, you go back and you look at what we budget and what things are, and you make your budget adjustments based on things that are happening.
That's right.
It's good to proceed.
That's right. We've done the mid-year adjustments when we begin next year's budget. So we have the most up-to-date information, if you will, at that time. And we have updated our projections for where we think fiscal year 2022 will end before we start projecting for fiscal year 23 or for the next year. So we do try to look at that in great detail.
You guys are amazing. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it might be helpful, but on page 80, it shows the 10-year history of property assessment.
Stability.
Not sure what happened in 2015, but only 1 year. Yeah.
It's a reval,
Revaluation.
the reval year.
And it's supposed to be a revaluation this year effective fiscal 24, right? We were at it.
This time next year, we'll be contemplating that revaluation. Yeah.
Great. Perfect. If you'll turn the page, we'll skip over other taxes and licenses. All that is are golf cart stickers. That's all that is. So I'll move you on to the next page here. Very little. Pages 82 and 83 represent the unrestricted intergovernmental revenues. In total, they're up 14.1% overall, and that's largely because of our local option sales tax, as we mentioned. Sales taxes are up 18.1% over the prior budget, and that's just because of stronger collections that we are seeing. overall. We are expecting an 8.5% increase in fiscal year 22 over fiscal year 21. And then we're we're expecting a 3% increase in 23 over these estimates. And that is based on the League of Municipalities statewide forecast. And so as we talked about before too, the sales tax on those online purchases have really brought in and proven to be quite significant, brought in quite a bit of revenue.
Remember the whole harmless reimbursement? Where is it?
That's related to local option sales tax. It was an article of sales tax that was repealed at some point. I think it may say in here when it was repealed or not. It was related to the Medicaid relief program. So when they repealed that, this was implemented to make municipalities whole. So there was not a gap in their revenue funding. So it's tied to sales tax. Because you can see it increasing at 15.9%, similar to that sales tax piece right above. Yeah, exactly. Our electricity sales taxes are up 3.5%, and that's solely based on number of heating days, cooling days, electricity trends, electricity use, so minor increase there. You'll see telecommunications and video programming sales taxes are expected to decline and continue to decline as fewer people use landlines and they're switching over to streaming methods for their TV content. So those continue to drop year over year. And those are the major sources there. There are some additional assumptions. If you are all interested, feel free to read through those assumptions, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to those. Next page, on page 85, is our restricted intergovernmental revenues. In total, they're up 31.2%, and that's related to Powell bill funding that increased in fiscal year 22, and that it is expected to continue at those levels in fiscal year 23. You may recall at the time of adoption of last year's budget, fiscal year 22's budget, the state budget was not in effect yet. So we didn't know what the funding was going to be for the Powell bill program. And so once the state's budget was adopted, they ended up increasing funding beyond the levels that we've seen prior to COVID. And so we have heard and expect that level of funding to continue this upcoming year. So just a $1,000 difference there. You see that. Also, other grants, typically we don't budget for grants of any kind unless we have a grant award notification. And fortunately, we do have two separate grant award notifications, one for public safety and one for transportation. And so those have been incorporated into the budget here as well.
Are these state grants or federal or?
Federal and state, both.
Okay.
Yep, looking at the respective department heads back here to confirm.
Well, the grant for transportation would be covering what?
That's the glass recycling program. There's going to be a glass container, basically, that will be placed on site.
Under the transportation.
I may have misspoken. That probably needs to be under environmental protection. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. You're right.
We have one question I've heard discussed often in my short time here about the Powell bill and how the money is distributed. I guess I was always under the impression until I saw the chart that there was more money involved. It's not that much money. Is it
What maybe what's confusing that is that that's what we get from the state for road resurfacing or road maintenance, right-of-way maintenance, what have you. We actually spend a little more than double that now.
Oh, okay. And we're able to do that by?
It's out of the general fund.
Oh, out of the general fund, we augment.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. All right.
That's right. We're at 1.3 million this year is what we're
I understand.
total Powell bill funding. That's right. Great.
What we call Powell bill.
What's that?
What we call.
We call Powell bill. That's exactly right. Any of those expenditures that ended up in the Powell bill department would be eligible for reimbursement, but to your point, we're not only spending state Powell bill funding to do it.
Okay, so as we have more money available in our surplus area, we're able to augment the Powell funding as we need or we see fit.
Well, we do it kind of systematically. We're not making wild swings every year. We increased it due to
cost of doing business a couple times over the last 5 years, but
That's good.
All right, if you'll turn to page 87, the next category, permits and fees. They're up 3.4% overall. You can see that's largely the permit inspection fees and planning and zoning fees are the largest piece of that together. We are expecting the number of homes constructed to remain at 150 homes in both fiscal year 22 and 23. You see the consistent budget year over year. There is the other larger piece of this is related to fire district revenue, and there's a 5.9% increase there. Part of that is related to our county distribution for those services, and the other piece of that is related to our fire services contract with the town of Taylortown to provide fire services to that community.
If by chance phase 5 does happen in this next fiscal year, and that's gonna be a whole lot more homes, do we increase the revenue budget from that?
I wouldn't expect it to impact next year. You gotta go through all the approval process, then you gotta put in all the infrastructure,
Okay,
and then they can start building homes, and it won't be all at once. They'll probably build them to market demand.
and I guess what do we increase? Well, we've also got down the road, we've got whatever it is on the left. So we got those homes coming in, we got phase 5 coming in, so.
We got the one out on Champlain Road too.
You know, along the lines of what Lydia is saying, is there a rule of thumb when property goes from undeveloped to they're putting 40 homes on it? We were collecting revenue on the undeveloped property. And then now we're placing homes at a certain value.
The year after,
It's the year after
Yeah.
where we see the jump there.
you're at the construction, right?
Right, because it is, the valuation date is January 1st,
Okay.
and so then you would see it the next year. So
And,
it's about a year lag.
and what is there a number to measure about what's the jump? In other words,
In dollar amounts that
Yeah.
we're in. So we do that by taking a look at some of the estimates and the construction estimates, and we do factor that into our projection when we're
We do.
projecting our ad valorem property tax. So we take the actual valuation from the previous year plus construction permits that have come in and knowing that there's gonna be a lag of some kind.
so,
But we do try to adjust it also for commercial properties too,
Same.
because some commercial properties bring in significant
sure,
additional value. Others are tax exempt, and so we adjust for those as well.
so, you know, if you're building 150 homes, eventually they pop onto your screen and you're gaining more revenue from them, but you have services to provide,
Right, exactly.
Assuming they're annexed into the village limits.
depending on where they're located. I mean, a lot of the homes are maybe lots around the village now or outside, right?
Hollycrest right now is, for the most part, outside of those limits, and it's uncertain as to whether they will petition for annexation or not.
Yeah.
So,
There's a road resurfacing question for them there, so.
Well, and the cottage is soon.
Mhm.
Cottage may petition for annexation.
Cottages is technically not.
They're an ETJ.
He's on that.
On our build is the amount of a building permit fee based on the valuation of the structure that they want to build,
Square footage, square footage.
square footage, okay.
There are other communities that try to do that, but if you put yourself in the shoes of a builder or developer, you're intentionally gonna report low
Right.
projected
No,
value.
that- I know that's what they do.
Yeah.
Okay, if you'll turn the page, then, page 89 is just a residual page of assessments. We don't have any active assessments right now, but we had actual amount for fiscal year 21, so this will be the last year that this page is on here unless that changes. So turn with me to page 90, those are sales and services. Total sales and services revenues are up 11.3%. That's primarily due to increases in harness track stall rent, fair barn rentals, and recreation fees. This category also includes $19,000 of library revenue, and that's related to book and photo sales. So that's incorporated here for fiscal year 23.
Why did the harness track, why did we have such a great year in 2021 and?
In 2021,
Yeah, we had, looks like the revenue generated was, healthy amount compared to what went on in 2022 or,
are you talking about the shows?
yeah,
The
harness track
shows?
shows events revenue.
Gotcha. That year shows, do you specifically remember anything?
I believe that number also includes all of our rentals by
Cross.
athletic groups for
Mhm.
lacrosse and soccer, which has
It
been
does.
huge in the last few years.
They
especially
use the
because-
track area.
That's correct. They use both the half mile and the mile track infield for soccer,
Soccer,
lacrosse,
lacrosse.
football. So that's probably a portion of that. Our actual number of shows has not necessarily increased, but the size of those do fluctuate from year to year.
And you see the line right above that is the stall rental revenue. That's the core revenue that's
Right.
coming in at the.
I mean,
harness track.
that's steadily going.
Right, and that's an increase. That's right. You see an increase there.
And the Fair Barn rental revenue
It's
is tremendous based off the 2021 actual.
right, because the facility was closed most of the year.
COVID, oh, no,
Yes.
right,
So
okay,
it's returning to
that's what.
pre-COVID levels,
It is.
right? Is that's where it is now. So we're seeing that come back. Fortunately, recreation fees, you see that increasing. We have the community center able to have additional programs there. That's a large driver behind that as well.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Sure. All right, if you'll turn to the next page then, page 92, unless there's further questions related to that. Other revenues, this basically includes your ABC revenues. There was a pretty significant increase in that from fiscal year 21. And our library endowment income, that is per the transfer agreement that was signed. And other miscellaneous revenues, which just comprise several other small item donations, sale of assets, and things like that, all combined into that account. So overall, other revenues are increased by about 10.4%.
Is just out of curiosity, is the dip in the, oh, that was the budgeted amount, the 2022, that people just stopped drinking?
Oh, yes, so that was our 2022.
Big distinction there.
Right, our 2022 budget was built on the year before that, which wasn't quite as fruitful.
Okay,
And then we now had more information when 2021 actuals came in. It was a lot greater than we expected. So we adjusted our estimate and are still expecting it to be high, but it seemed
party time is
So
back in
large.
Pinehurst, okay,
it was exceptionally large in 21.
yeah, all right.
COVID.
Right,
People
COVID.
just drink it alone.
COVID's the answer. On the right-hand side of the page, then you'll see the investment income. So we are expecting that to increase $133,000. Much, a great improvement over the previous year for fiscal year 22. And that's largely because of the Fed's plan to increase interest rates after they reached historic lows the past couple of years. The Fed has already increased interest rates twice this year so far, this calendar year so far, and it's currently at a rate of 0.75% to 1%, that range. And so there are continued plans for that to increase. So we'll reevaluate this too as the year progresses next year. It may adjust it also depending on how. That's a bit of good news. If you'll turn the page, one more, page 94, other financing sources, or the next item. We've talked about this, that's the $4.3 million, which is a portion of the total $5.3 million that's going to be coming from the American Rescue Plan Act Fund. On the right page, showing you page 95, fund balance appropriations. That is normally where we would have basically our budget balancing source here. To balance the budget, but in this case, in this year, we have utilized the other financing sources instead of using fund balance appropriation. So typically there is a number in here. We are planning to add $1.76 million to fund balance this year, and we've already chatted about that as well, which would end fund balance of 54.9%. Budget actual variance is incorporated in that, as we talked about. Any questions about revenues? That concludes the revenue section. No additional items?
So very, very stable.
Very stable.
With some increases, but very little in the way of risk or decreases, right?
Correct. accurate observation. Right. Okay, then I will not take you through this next section, but if you turn the page 96 starts the individual department section. You'll see a department profile at the top that sort of explains that department, some of the key players and how it is comprised. You'll see the budget summary next. If there are revenue sources allocated to these departments, those are identified as well. And then in some departments, not governing body, and a few others do not have them as well, but the rest of the departments will have the key performance indicators listed for each department also. So that's where you can see some of the things that each individual department is measuring to ensure that we achieve the overall goals of the village. So you're free to browse through that if you're interested. But what I will have you do, just for the sake of time, I'll hit the high spots. If you'll turn back with me to page 72, that's that summary page we touched on just a little bit earlier on. And so this is the one that shows the expenditures by type up at the top. That salaries and benefits budget is currently at $13.7 million. Included in that number is a staffing level of 158.6 full-time equivalents or FTEs. And that includes the addition of 2 police officers in fiscal year 23. And so that is what is included in that figure. Merit raises for employees are also included. They're recommended at an average of 2%, but the policy allows for 0 to 3%, plus a cost of living adjustment of 4.7%. And that is per the calculation that is included in our policy.
Can you or Angie remind me, is the merit increases based on some sort of performance system that we put in place where there are ratings done? I'm trying to draw on my previous life. Is that how it works?
Every employee has an annual performance review. And it's not directly tied to that because different supervisors rate different people differently. So, but that's the most significant input.
There's a link, but it's not a hard. Okay.
Let's discuss a little bit more on that. How we got again to the 4% or 2%. What those formulas are and how we.
The 2% is this point a matter of standing council policy. We developed this 3 years ago now.
At least, might be
4.
4, maybe 4 now.
And the idea is that every year you'll budget 2% and it's up to management department heads to allocate that 2% across the workforce where everybody gets somewhere between 0 and 3%, but the average has to come up to no more than 2%.
That's up to the department heads. Jeff, if I'm using that.
They're approved by management. So department heads develop a distribution plan and managers review that plan and approve it.
Managers being the 3 of
The
them.
3 of us, yeah.
Okay. So that's how the merit
Yeah.
is allocated out.
Mhm.
Okay. And the discretion, if I, again, just for everybody's education, mine too, it's the discretion of the department manager as to how those merit increases are distributed.
Yeah.
0 to 3, but the average must come out at 2 from the department itself. Is that right?
Right, that's, sometimes we'll go back and we'll buy some coaching about, things that we see. But in general, the result is very closely aligned with what the department head recommends.
Then 4% is where the formula comes in.
4.7%, and this is tied to the existing village council policy as well. That policy calls for an annual CPI adjustment to not only the pay scale, but each employee's rate of pay as well. And the way we calculate that is rather than, I'll start off by saying the end point is December 31st.
Yeah.
And rather than just look at December 31st over the previous December 31st, what we do is we take an average over the year. So we compare the previous January to the January before that, the previous February to February, on, and we average those numbers, and that levels out the spikes that you see in CPI. The end result will be the same, but it's
So, well, it's the leveling effect, as you mentioned the other night, we had a discussion about this. So, for next year, we're likely to see the cost of living adjustment higher than even this year because of the potentially increasing rate month by month.
Could be, I mean, we don't know what's gonna happen.
Right.
If it stayed, if, for example, this, the month-over-month CPI that we see reported every month stays in the 8% range for the next 7 months,
Till December.
then you're gonna see a recommendation next year of 7 or 8%. If it falls, then we're gonna be looking at ourselves next year, it'll look the other way around. They'll say, wait, the December CPI said 2%, for example, but we'll be coming in at a higher recommendation because of the average over the year.
I think that's a fair formula. Any other council members on
They would
that?
have to.
Correct.
Sorry, Jeff.
I said, identify what it is and then you pay for the bill numbers.
Any other questions from council on the formulas? I realize I asked those two questions, my back to the. I'm not gonna go to some. Just want everybody to be on the same page. 10%. Go back.
Salaries and benefits, so this also includes a 10% increase in group insurance costs. That's just an estimate. It could fluctuate. So we have that factored in as well. Operating expenditures is right at 8 million. That includes all expenditures other than salaries and benefits. This does include $1.3 million to resurface approximately 4.5 miles or so of streets in the Powellville department. More information that is in the actual department page on 112, but I won't turn you there. But just know that that's available if you're interested. There's another $200,000 in streets and grounds, in the streets and grounds department for patching. And so that $8 million, a large portion of that is related to road maintenance. Let's see that. This also includes operations for the Given Memorial Library and Tufts Archives. As I mentioned, this year is the first full year of operations that has been incorporated into the budget. And so that is factored into operating costs as well. It also includes a taser and body camera upgrade replacement in the police department for around $196,000. And that's listed on the operating side because those items don't meet the capitalization threshold. We have a $5,000 capitalization threshold, and these items individually don't reach that limit. So they're on the operating side, even though they are a one-time purchase. And so we have backed that out of future years. So it's not a recurring cost that you see in the 5-year plan. Debt service expenditures, as we mentioned, is at $0. Capital of $5.3 million is 19% higher, or excuse me, is 19% of expenditures, total expenditures. So we can see the detail of that. If you'll turn with me to page 130, kind of at the end of that general fund section, 137, please. The end of the general fund section, but before the capital project now.
137.
137, yes. This is the detailed listing of all the capital items that are funded in the budget, the fiscal year 2023 budget. You'll see on here some of the major items. There's the potential land acquisition for public services relocation of $350,000, storm drainage projects of $355,000, pedestrian facilities of $400,000, unspecified initial building improvements for the library and archives at $1 million, synthetic turf installation at $1.2 million. So those are the large items, but you can skim through there to see if there are any others that you have any questions about or want to speak to.
So I'm sorry, 137 would be the best place to concentrate.
137, yeah, 137 and 138. So together, yes, together those, that's the full listing of all the capital items that make up that 5.3 million in total capital that's incorporated into the budget.
I think that since this is the first year of the library and archive being part of the budget, it would be helpful to spend a little time on that if council would like. At some point in today or Wednesday, depending on how we do that. But in order to do that, I'm not suggesting we do it right now, that in the process of these discussions. How far in the agenda are you hoping to get tonight? Through everything or?
Everything if possible, right, everything if possible, depending on your questions.
All right, well then, we're kind of 3B right now, right? On the agenda.
Let's see. I have a more detailed version, let me get to that. Thank you. Yes, 3B.
So if we want to have a little more in-depth discussion of the library or Parks and Rec or whatever else, maybe we should tie that later and try to get through the agenda you prepared in the way you want it. Some of the questions we did not do that anyway. But it might be helpful, I think, to go over the library section.
Sure.
As we can.
Is there a particular section in here where the library is?
Yeah, it'll be in the
Page
departmental stuff.
121.
Answer the page number so that I can look at it for tomorrow.
Or if you want to flip there, I don't think
This won't take that long, I don't think.
I don't think so.
We're up to it.
Let's go ahead and do it. Turn to 121. On the left-hand side, you'll see the summary of salaries and benefits, the operating costs of the facility, capital, which does include $1 million that we mentioned for potential building
That's
improvement.
a building improvement.
Right,
Okay.
right. And then below, you'll see the revenue sources, which the main revenue coming in related to that would be the endowment income. Again, that calculation is per the transfer agreement. It is 4% of the endowment balance over the previous, I believe, 3 years.
I think 3-year average, yeah, or 3-year average at 4%.
Right,
What falls under the miscellaneous category there? It's larger than state aid or
right.
roast, what is that?
That is the sale of photos, books,
Oh,
book
from,
licensing.
that's from, so a lot of the
The
givens.
the archive
Not
side,
gonna touch Memorial Day. Okay.
right, the fee schedule that was adopted, that you all adopted and approved. A lot of those fees related to the Tufts archives, photo usage and things like that. That's included there. Any questions when looking at that? There's not
I'm
much.
looking, I'm sorry, let's see here. Okay, on page 121, event income. Now, there's a bit of budget.
Went away,
It's
yes.
going away because we don't have a plan yet to do the maybe some of them. We don't have a plan for that.
So how that worked, last year when we were developing the fiscal year 2022 budget, the transfer agreement was not finalized, wasn't in place. We didn't know what that was going to look like exactly. So what we did, we took the existing Given Memorial Library and Tufts Archives budget and basically just prorated it for 3/4 of the year, is what we planned for. But since then, there were some adjustments to the responsibilities of the village and of the foundation, the board, right? And so that function has moved over to the foundation, the events, hosting events and fundraising, things like that. So that's why that item has gone away.
And the library endowment income increase was, what transaction produced that? From 37 to 1.112.
Another
Transfer agreement.
The transfer.
The transfer agreement.
The transfer agreement dictated that.
Okay.
amount. Exactly, and you see the donations drop from 112 down to 500,000.
I
At
see.
one point, we thought, wait, we may be the main mechanism for, sending out letters and things like that, but that function is going to be kept with the board. So that's why the adjustments are there.
Okay.
Now, I haven't spoken with Stuart Mills, the chairman of the board, on this particular subject. But do we know anything about how the board itself may be reconstituting itself or not? in any event this fall?
I'll remind.
And I'll talk to Stuart about that.
The main source of their income right now is the bookstore.
Right.
They have hired an assistant who will be in charge of activities, events, income producing sorts of things.
To be done in the bookstore.
Not necessarily in the book, but sort of like we had Given to Go and plea letters, things like that. In the meantime, we have not had a plea letter. We normally have them in the spring of the year, and that didn't happen. So, I mean, these things are all getting organized. And finally, we will have events that we have annually, they are gonna have a low country boil, which we had planned for before. And things like that, so they are already in the process of continuing their events and, did I answer your question?
I think so.
You know, that's what the board is trying to do in addition to the income that will come from the endowment, they will continue to do events. And hopefully follow the pattern, because we've had some very successful things. And the community involves the community and they're really enjoying it, so.
I got a couple of questions. I'm looking at the strategic goals and the estimates. The projection of books checked out, how do we reach those estimates? We're saying we actually checked out 20,000 in 2021.
Very,
I'm on page 122, strategic goal, promote active living and cultural opportunities.
well, they're based on past performance, but, you know, like everyone else with COVID, we were closed. So some of these are estimates, and we based on the number of new cards you get, you can extrapolate, assume that the
I see.
person who got the new card will probably check
Check
out
out a book, okay.
books or 10 books a year maybe, or something like that, and so that's kind of how we.
Okay, I got it.
And if I may, just, I want to make sure I don't know which microphone is being used, but it may be helpful for the recording if there's a question to a department head, if they want to come up and maybe sit at the chair or sit closer, just to ensure that we can get it on the recording. And Pat, to your point, with these being estimates, this being the first year, take a best stab at these, and then going into next year, being able to have a lot more background.
Well, I can see how if you made 2021 the COVID year, that would, you know, the drop off from 32 to 20 is pretty clear. And then we're estimating we're back up sort of almost to the pre-COVID year, I guess, of 2020. So we're back up to, well, we can call normal. But then we're projecting much more in 23 and all the way to 27. And Audrey's saying it's somewhat driven by the number of cars that go out. You can make an educated guess. Okay.
Also, we keep stats for the state library too, so we can look at.
That's all we're asking
And there's an expansion plan before 2027 too. Bigger library, more books.
Oh, yeah.
That was easy. Yes, and,
Just answer the question again.
okay, where was I?
You were saying
What was the question?
that was about the projections from the library cards, the number of books that are checked out, number of ebooks checked out.
And yeah, I mean, presumably with more people and the community growing, we'll have more people getting cards, more uses. And another thing that we didn't do during COVID was we didn't have as many activities or programs. So if somebody comes in for Gather Not Given, then they look at the books afterwards, or when the kids come in, they all check out, 8, 10 books after that. And so as our programs increase, we expect a lot more activities from that. So we're slowly getting back to what was our usual thing. And again, we expect with the growth of the community and the growth of the facility to push it forward.
One other question. Remind me, I know we've been through this before. Are we going to have library cards for residents, finders, and non-residents, and how is that?
We have been through that before. My understanding is that everybody has a card now, is grandfathered in for a certain period of time.
Yeah, what we were gonna do, we need to evaluate the software program for the capabilities to track membership. We do anticipate that at some point there'd be a non-resident fee implemented. But that I don't foresee that happening in this calendar year. Whether it were to come back to pass in this upcoming fiscal year, that's possible.
Yeah.
But we need to do some homework on the software system and determine what the capabilities are to track those memberships and when they're falling due and that. So the cards will have to be reissued at some point. and because they're gonna have to have an expiration on them. So when you go to scan it, you know, this membership is no longer valid. So that whole mechanism still got to be worked out.
But another thing too, and that was important to us in our other iteration, and it should be here too, is that with fundraising and all that, we had many people who gave from Seven Lakes, West End. And we have lots of people who are part-time residents.
Yeah.
And they don't all own property. They come from under something, they have cars and use the facilities. And a lot of these people, they don't do it. They don't pick Pinehurst, as opposed to, they don't have another choice. I mean, they come to us because that's the library that's here. And.
I'd be interested in the metrics on that, just how many people there are in that situation.
I did it in 2019, that we did that thing, it had a pie chart and had everybody from West End, everybody from Taylortown. You know, we have a lot of people from Southern Pines too, because if they live outside the Southern Pines limit, they come to us, yeah.
Right now, there's the
They're not
people that
paying.
use our Parks and Recreations program,
Yeah,
but we can
that's-
charge them for it.
Same place like, where you go to the closest library, you go to the closest ball field.
Right, and they're coming, I mean, there isn't a library in West End, and there isn't a library in Taylortown or wherever these folks are coming from.
They don't pay a municipal sales tax, property tax.
No, they don't, I'm just saying, yeah.
And the management of the library is through Jeff Batten from the Assistant Manager Committee, correct?
Right.
Any other questions on the library?
Who Audrey would readily admit is doing. Waiting for you.
You need to know where I'm going. We're just told.
Any other questions about the library? From any council members? Thank you, Rod.
You're welcome.
And Jeff?
The only other caveat I was going to mention on the projection of the number of books going up further is we have had some conversations, Audrey and I, and her staff, about the time that has been spent in years past on fundraising efforts can now be spent on providing programs and services to the public. And so we think that we'll have probably a better outreach and have a more robust number of programs that bring people into the library. And so hopefully the utilization, close to check out this kind of thing will be increasing. So,
Thank you, Jeff. I think that covers the discussion that we said I had in mind for the library at this point, so we can move on to whatever part of the agenda is next. April.
If there are no additional questions about the specific departments, I think that was a great point to talk through, being that this is a new addition to our suite of services. If you have no other questions related to the actual capital items in this year's budget, I don't know if you want to take any time or ask any questions related to that. Again, that was on page 137 and 138. If not, we can make our way into the capital project funds. Flip the page over to, flip on over to 140. On the left, you have the library expansion capital project fund, and on the right, you have the carriage house parking facility capital project fund. The library expansion, you may recall, $400,000 is incorporated into fiscal year 22's budget, so the current fiscal year that we're in right now, for design of this project. We will be opening that fund before June 30th, so it will be presented to you all at a council meeting, a regular meeting before June 30th, to open the fund and transfer that money into that fund to start it and have available appropriations for the RFQ that will be going out for those design services.
So we'll be obligating the funds prior to the contract award. Is
We'll
that
be
right?
appropriating the funds, if you will.
So
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
Appropriating.
The budget, so the budget is created in the general fund, and we're gonna we're gonna open up the capital project fund and have those funds available. If we wait until after June 30th, all appropriations in the general fund lapse, so they go away. So we have to open up that capital project fund before June 30th, so that $400,000 will remain intact until the project is complete.
Okay.
And that's why that order of operations is in place there.
Okay.
You can see here the $400,000 for design, and then another 3.6 million for construction costs, so a total estimate of around $4 million. That's what's incorporated here.
And that actually might be $1 million higher than that.
Right, and that $1 million that we've talked about being in fiscal year 23, if it is not utilized in fiscal year 23, we will move those funds into the capital costs for the construction of the project. Yes. We have $1 million incorporated currently in the fiscal year 23 budget.
So that would make a total of 5 million?
Right,
If you recall, there was an option to do something where we might acquire a different facility. And the thought
Okay,
was that would make the
right,
scale of this
right,
project smaller.
Got it.
so all the operating costs associated with this expansion is also incorporated into the 5-year forecast, which we'll show here in a moment. And that's addition of 3 FTEs and just additional operating expenditures related utilities, just whatever it costs to operate a facility that's larger and an expanded footprint. And all that's incorporated. On the right side here, it's Carriage House Parking Facility. This is a $3.5 million project. Both of these are funded with fund balance. There's no debt issuance proposed at this time. And that is made possible largely because of the ARPA funds, the one-time funding source that's coming in from that program that allows us to utilize those costs. Minimal operating costs associated with the Carriage House Parking Facility, $20,000 in the first year and $20,500 in the second year. You don't see that right here, but that's all the additional costs are projected, but those are incorporated into the forecast as well.
Well, this is something I bring up all the time. Just because we budget this doesn't mean we're necessarily going to do it, but we've got to budget it in case. I think there are people who see this and assume we're gonna jump up tomorrow and commit ourselves to this, but we've got a budget for it. If we don't, we can't.
We can't do it. Right, this is a plan, that's right. And so you're adopting, when we come to you in June, you will be adopting the budget for fiscal year 23. So you actually will have funds appropriated for specific projects for year 1. The remaining 4 years of the 5-year plan are committing certain levels of expenditure in those years. You're not specifically committing to certain projects. Now, that being said, if we have it in the plan, then there's a reason for it being in the plan. We've seen a need or, heard from the community that's something they would like. But you are not specifically committing those exact dollars to that exact project per se.
In the event we don't likely see us really doing anything in 2023 design. We've got the library is like, front and center project A. Where the Carriage House parking is certainly doesn't fall to that category. If we were not to include that in our 2023 budget, we could include it in 2024 or 2025, where we might think we, at that time, may be in a little better position to dedicate time and resources. So.
And to that point, the carriage houses, which is a part of the IEP to expand downtown parking facilities, is slated to begin in FY '24. So although it's in the '23 plan, there's no action within FY '23. It would begin.
24 is design.
Yeah, 24 is design, yes, sir.
That's right. That's a good point. I didn't mention that piece. Thank you. So what you're seeing here is the total 5-year cost for each of these projects, not fiscal year 23, not just that 1 year, first year plan. Exactly right. Perfect. Any other questions related to that? If not, we'll flip over to special revenue fund tab. This is the new American Rescue Plan Act Special Revenue Fund. This was adopted with a grant project ordinance, which means the fund will remain open for the life of the grant itself until all items are expended. And this is where we have the $5.3 million. We've received half of that to date. We have not received the other half yet, but we're anticipating it possibly in June, it may be July when we received it, when we received that second piece of it. But this is also the estimated amount that we received a year or so ago. So that amount could change to the amount that we get. It would likely increase if it were to change. If certain municipalities or towns or something declined and the pot grew, then there's a chance that we could get a piece of that. But
That'll probably happen.
it may. There are a lot of strings attached to the funding, and so it may. Okay. We've already talked about how we're planning to utilize those funds. So if you have no questions related to that, if you'll flip over to the 5-year financial forecast, starting on page 143. And so this section details out our forecasting methodology, some of the key assumptions that we use when developing this 5-year forecast. We incorporate all the information that's provided to us by department heads during the budget preparation process. So they are projecting out costs using their IAP workbooks for the 5-year period. That includes any revenue sources that they're expecting to come in and increase as a result of pursuing something. It includes any savings or operating savings that they would expect if they pursue a certain project. Any additional operating costs, salaries and benefits costs, any of those items are incorporated in this IAP workbooks. We also incorporate any dollar figures associated with OFEs, the opportunities for innovation and improvement that each department has. We have our own list. Those are all incorporated here. Any capital replacement plan requests or other capital requests are all factored in, and staffing requests for the 5-year period are incorporated in. As I mentioned, in that last year, or in the later year of the plan with the library expansion, there's the addition of the 3 FTEs there, and that's what I'm referring to. The key assumptions for this plan begin on 145. We project each of our revenue accounts in the 5-year forecast on an account by account basis. We don't just take total revenues and apply 2%. We look at every individual revenue source and apply rates based on what they're seeing in our community trends, statewide trends, national trends, US Open, as I mentioned, the impacts that could have on our revenue sources. And so we have factored that into our forecast. Property taxes in this plan include a 0.5-cent decrease in fiscal year 23, a 0.5-cent increase in fiscal year 24, and that's for operating expenditure pressures consistent with the previous several plans that have been adopted. Remain flat in fiscal year 25, and a 1-cent increase in fiscal year 26. And that's related to the library expansion, staffing, and operating costs. And then remain flat in fiscal year 27. So a couple of different stair-step adjustments there that you'll see in the 1-page report when we get there. We are assuming a 1% valuation growth in each year. It's pretty consistent. If you'll recall, this in fiscal year 23, we're estimating about a 1.24% real and personal property. So very consistent with this valuation growth assumption. Sales tax revenues are planned to increase at 3% each year of the 5-year plan, except in fiscal year 24. And that year, we are projecting a 5% increase in fiscal year 24, and that's directly related to the favorable impacts of Pinehurst Resort hosting the US Open in our area. And that's based on some historical information. We looked back at previous opens to see how sales tax adjusted, and we increased it as such.
But 3% in the non-open year.
Yes, correct.
That's
Kind of standard growth, right? Exactly.
not much.
Exactly.
And
That's
what is
we
it, what
estimate.
did you say was the open year?
The open is 5%. All other years are 3%, and that's in line with what we've seen in historical growth. But that could also change, and we evaluate that each year and make adjustments to it as we know more. In fiscal year 2024, there is $1 million included in other revenues, and that's related to fundraising for the library expansion project, and that would be in connection with the board's assistance with that. But it's a capital fundraising campaign, if you will. All right, you will turn to 147. You'll see the planned capital expenditures and those expenditure levels in each of the 5 years in this table format. And if you'll go ahead and turn one more page, you'll get to see the 5-year forecast in all its glory here on page 149. That's the one-page summary of all the inputs that we've incorporated into this plan. A couple of key measures that we review and utilize when we meet to review this forecast to determine sustainability and viability of the plan would be the fund balance target level, as well as our estimated operating margin. Those are the two bottom rows of this one-page table on page 149. You'll see our fund balance starts in year 1 at 54.9. It increases in fiscal year 24. That's partially because of that fundraising campaign that we're doing with $1 million revenue incorporated there. But then we're turning around in fiscal year 25 and spending a large portion of that as we fund the construction of the library and the design of the parking facility. And then in 26, another minor decrease at 37.9% with funding the construction of the parking facility at $3.15 million. In that final year of the plan, a minor increase of 38.3%. So all of these are well above the council's adopted policy to maintain 30%. You can see the decline in those later years related to spending those funds. Then on the operating margin side, our target operating margin is 89 to 91%. And you can see that that is consistent across. You do see a reduction in fiscal year 24. And again, it goes back to that $1 million one-time revenue source, which skews that figure and showing in 0.84, which is specifically related to that one-time revenue source. And you can see it gradually increasing in those out years, which is typical for what we see in our plans, because the likelihood of us ending the year better than that last year of the plan is pretty high. Any questions related to that? Related to the plan itself, the 5-year plan?
If we can continue to build fund balance, we will spend it in the out years. According to things we generally, we have on the plan.
In this plan, we actually stopped building fund balance next year. Not this coming year, but in FY24.
Fiscal 24.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we start, then the big projects start hitting.
Right.
It's probably also worth noting that outside this plan, there's a potential fire station, there's Newman Public Services, and somewhere down the road, there's some level of development on West Planters Park. So there's some big tickets that are outside this 5-year plan we're going to be thinking about as well.
Nevertheless, for this coming year, tax rate goes down.
And I think that we'll see what the economy does. I mean, that's the big wild card right now, but I think that next year we're going to be looking at ourselves saying we might be.
Well, I'm hoping to, Jeff, but go ahead and say it.
There's a lot of moving pieces here with the revaluation,
Okay.
but I mean, the net impact might be lower next year. We'll see how it works out.
That's why we do that evaluation each year, reassess, reevaluate. Are there adjustments we can make?
So there's another side of this. I expect that as we go through this year and look at our budget performance, our budget to actual variance is going to be much tighter this year.
Because of inflation?
I don't think that we have necessarily realized the impacts of inflation on the full impact of inflation on this year's budget.
You're saying 2022,
This 2023.
2023.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think it's okay because we've got that budget to actual variance. So,
yeah, we got one.
and there's nothing wrong with, a little tighter budget that makes us be as fiscally responsible as possible. So I'll throw that out there. We'll see how it works out.
There's nothing in the numbers that should make an accountant sweat.
No.
Okay, right, okay, all right, I just wanted, when I'm looking, we were looking at these margins and percentage of the budget. Nothing, even in the other scenarios.
Yeah.
Is a cause to sweat over, particularly as you look downstream, where we've got 300 new homes or so that are gonna be coming online to be evaluated. We've got an evaluation of our existing, what is it? I don't know, 9,500 residences, properties owned. And we've got a US Open falling in the middle of that, which might pump up things a little bit based on history. So
All those things are already incorporated.
I understand, that's where I'm working from, all those things are, you know, they gotta be in there,
Yeah.
but those are all very positives, and then we have the overriding positive that we're planners. So it's, you know, it's good, I mean, you know, you gotta look at the brand, I mean, you know, they're not moving here to live there, maybe, I know that, people aren't coming here because I live here, they're coming here because of the Village of Pinehurst. And so, I mean, I think the numbers are healthy, good numbers. And from my standpoint, I think that we've got to make some decisions on some of these sort of big ticket items. But I think they distort a little because of the size of them distorting what the next few years will be like. And they only distort them to making things tighter, not looser. I mean, but we are a very fiscally healthy community. No debt, lowest tax rate of any municipality in Moore County. While other municipalities are bragging about not raising their taxes, we actually cut ours to the surprise. And we give credit to the staff who did the numbers and obviously came up with that recommendation. So I think we've got some wiggle room, and we have some areas where we can make improvements to maybe make a little more productive. I keep thinking a little bit about the harness track. I didn't realize we had soccer and lacrosse exhibits. That's why I love going to these meetings. Here, I learned things that I didn't know. And I think, you know, it's more things that we might be able to capitalize along the roads of Pinehurst.
I had a golf cart race this past weekend. It was like,
I wasn't here. I would have gone to it. I go to a wedding.
but I agree with you. I think the growth you described is certainly puts a financially stable position here, and projection there. I also agree with you that the capital expenditures that we have to be cautious on some stuff. But continue to grow.
Jeff, what you said a few minutes ago, though, is that this is a tighter budget, so you're expecting senior management to watch expenditures and a little more than normal. I mean, we can still buy big books and pens, but we ought to be careful on the others.
We've had some pretty large budget actual variances over the last several years. I think this could be tighter. That's just my hunch, but I think that our departments had done a great job in making their recommended budgets and you know, we do a lot of that based on historical performance. And then increment that off known, you know, decrements and known increases that we have to build into the plan. When we reviewed that data though, we didn't really talk a lot about inflation. And as I think back about it, under a lot of numbers that stayed flat. So it's going to be all right. We're just going to be a little bit tighter, I think, at the end of the year than we have been over the last several years.
We do have a good cushion. I mean, we've got a great cushion here.
Yeah.
We got the nerve,
We're in good shape, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that's good. I think, you know, it's probably, you're right, it's probably about to be a little tighter because nobody's sure about what shoe's gonna drop overall in the economy, but
That does pose a little more risk also, in the sense if you have the, by mitigating the risk, so we have the bigger cushion, it increases the risk of inflation. The purchasing power of the dollar that we have on hand is being reduced for our citizens.
yes.
And so that's where the balance comes in. You don't want it too big, you don't want it too small, but enough for a cushion, but not enough for taking.
Right, right.
And Jeff reminds me of COVID, this Jeff. we were looking ahead and thought, oh, we got some things in our budget, maybe we need to park up a little bit until we see how we're doing. Because we made that list, we prioritized how we're gonna spend our money, and then once we realized we really were not as bad off this week, then we could spend. So we may get in that situation, I don't know, but it was good that you guys did that. And we just kind of took it easy for a little while until we knew we were safe.
So if my hunch is correct, you're gonna find, I think, at the end of the year, that everything still fits in the budget. We might be coming to you with more budget
Adjustments.
adjustments, we're moving things back and forth.
Right.
Here's an adjustment, maybe, or at least a little bit of a line. In recent discussions of the council on a variety of areas, we talk about enforcement. Whether it's police enforcement or planning department enforcement or codes. I don't know because I don't know all details of the budgets, but are we able to do more enforcement of things if that becomes something the council wishes to do through different policies we may adopt? Are we able to, is that something we'll be able to do, or we need to think about at some future date a budget change for those things?
Darren, where are we on the 1/2 FTE code enforcement?
We had our other priorities within the department first.
Yeah.
We might switch around some of the duties that new planner, that might be one of their new duties to do it part-time. Our numbers enforcement, I think are right near that 90% right now. So I don't think we're having a major problem with responding to code enforcement. It's the codes, it's codes on the books that I think are falling short.
Yeah.
So we need to upgrade some of our codes to respond better to some of the situations that we have to feel.
Well, and you're meaning the whole PDO update, which is still a ways off, that's part of that. That may result in some additional enforcement.
There's PDO, there's municipal code, we're looking at some of the nuisance code updates.
Right.
We have building regulations, we have minimum housing regulations that all could be updated. Mike is working on the stormwater master plan that may include some additional enforcement. So those are all things that I think with the stormwater, that might actually have to be another enforcement personnel housed in somebody's department. But I think right now, the way our numbers are looking, I think our response is right about at 2 days, we're getting back to the 90% area.
And with regard to the police, I'm not sure what you're referring to or asking about, unless it's like specific patrols that are targeting downtown for parking. I think that our police officers are appropriately assigned duties. I don't know that dedicating police assets to specifically patrolling, looking for parking violations is an appropriate use of their time. I think, and that's not to say that parking violations aren't valid and they need to be addressed, but I think that their appropriate place in the scheme of things is when you see it because you're out patrolling, you address it. Or when somebody calls with a complaint, you address it. And our police department does a great job in those response type of situations. Was there something else to that, or?
Well, no, but just as we've been talking about it, you know, the whole area of enforcement across the villages, codes and planning department and police department potentially is on people's minds and certainly on the public's minds. So as we go forward, I just would have the comfort to know if we need to do more in enforcement or hire different people or get the PDO updates up to date or make sure the police are not necessarily seeking out parking violations or other related street type stuff, that we are addressing that. And not just hearing about it in my VOP or other things.
And I know that
we're doing something to do that.
I know that you're all sensitive to this as well. And a lot of times we hear from complaints about enforcement from the public, but what they're calling attention to isn't a violation of the
Sometimes that's true.
whether it's a code or law, and it's just a perception problem.
The other thing I would add there is our responses on the community survey. I think our responses for code enforcement,
We're very good.
we're very good. I think they're in 70% range, so.
Yeah.
We do get really good marks there.
And that doesn't sound high, but code enforcement is one of those service areas where it's very difficult to do well. Because some people want you to do more, and there's an equal number of folks that want you to do less.
Well,
Yeah.
we see how all this evolves and.
Yeah.
We'll raise it at the appropriate time with different agents. Those are my 2 points on that.
Perfect, great. Since we're on the 5-year forecast, you have some other materials in your packet that
Yeah.
Pat mentioned too. So just for everyone's benefit here, the next item that's in the packet of handouts is a snapshot of the original proposed forecast, just so you can see it in the handout format, the exact same document that's in your book, it's just in a handout. Then the one right behind that is the requested scenario A. So at the last council meeting, Pat made a recommendation to see a couple of different scenarios, and this is the first of those. This is what the forecast would look like if we maintained a 31-cent tax rate through the 5-year planning period for the 5-year period. You can see fund balance remains above 30%. However, our operating margin begins increasing substantially in fiscal year 26, and it's above our 89 to 91% range. So at 26, it's up to 92, and then in 27, it's up to 93. As you see that increase in that out year.
And that is without the other suggestion, which is the scenario B, that we remove the carriage house.
Correct. So scenario A is exactly the same as the original. The only change is the tax rate in scenario A. Then scenario B, the next page in your packet, that
Please don't say scenario A, B, C, it's just page 1, page 2.
up at the top in
In the red.
in the red, up at right here.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry on that, yes.
Yes,
Yes, it's up here in the top right, exactly. Yeah, so the first one is that original plan exactly in the book.
Yep.
Then that requested scenario A is just the tax rate change. And then requested scenario B is the tax rate change, so the exact same as the previous page, plus removing the carriage house parking facility. And so that is largely just a capital expenditure. There are really minor operating costs associated with the parking structure for utilities and some maintenance costs. So we estimate those at about $20,000 in 26 and 20,500, I think, in 27. So very small, but those adjustments have been removed from scenario B, just so that you can see what it would look like if we removed that carriage house parking facility capital project. And in this scenario, the same, the operating margin is essentially the same because of the very, very small operating costs associated with that, but a higher level of fund balance because you're not expending the $3.5 million for the construction of the facility. And these are just for your information for the request. If you want to talk through any of those at greater detail, I'm happy to do that.
Well, this was only asked for last Tuesday night, very late, and here we are, a couple days later, really, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no further questions on that, we can move into the capital improvement plan section.
Minor question.
Sure.
Do we get our population predictions? Is that from the Census Bureau? Is that from, I'm just trying to, where do we grab that from?
So we get the current population from the state demographer's
That I got.
office.
Okay,
And then our projections, we project out in future years based on historical increases, like the
New home construction at
rolling average,
3.
people per home, right?
so I guess it sort of looks like we're figuring 300 people a year.
Right, which would be equivalent to around 100, 150 homes.
Right.
Right,
Okay.
and 2-ish people.
I get the math, I just kind of, you know.
And a lot of that detail is included in your retreat materials too. There's additional detail on some of that, so if you still have your retreat binder, some of that detail is in the back data for that.
To that point, that would be a part of the environmental scan documentation that we talked about. If you're looking for it after this.
Right, which section is it in? It's in that environmental scan section, exactly.
Tell me a little bit, and maybe other people, the operating margin as budgeters and financial planners, what is the operating margin meaning to you if the difference is, 90.90 versus 0.92?
So the concept is that we want to make sure that we build a plan that ensures that our operating expenses aren't outrunning our future capital needs.
Right, okay, so
It's also a dynamic cash flow issue. Is that a part, well, I mean, the month of May, you end up
Oh,
spending, $100,000 more than the month of April versus the month of March, that kind of stuff. So you have this fluctuation that goes in there.
yeah,
And so I thought that played a part there, just to make sure you have the cash on hand, make sure you have proper cash flow.
That's more general, well, we want to have fund balance.
Right, that's exactly right, for that reason, because our revenue sources come in key times of the year. And it's primarily in the fall, once the property tax bills go out, we get a large inflow of money at that
And I
point.
guess I missed the question, but what was the specific question that you had?
I was trying to,
Operating margin.
yeah, the operating margin, because as I look at the original proposed forecast, the operating margin in 2027 is 0.91. And I look at the one where, and that's with tax increases. And skip the scenario A, okay, it was just only adjust the taxes. So go to scenario B, where you, again, kept the tax rate at 0.31, but you've taken out the carriage house. Your operating margin is, 0.93. Again, it's not
That's bad.
it's not, it's not.
Trust us, Pat, that's bad.
No, I don't think that's bad. It's bad from 0.91, what you are
Yeah.
proposing, to 0.93.
Mhm.
I don't think that's bad. I think that's a powerful word to say bad. I don't.
Well, I mean, so you're talking about a little more than 20% of your capital funding capability that you're building into a long, I mean, it perpetuates year after year after year after year.
What do you mean?
What's not used for operating is used for capital.
That's until March.
And if
2% is more than 20% of 9%. 91, 93.
Okay. All right. But in the same breath, the percentage of our surplus goes up
Mhm.
to 45% versus 38%.
Those are that's one-time money.
I understand that, but it's going up.
Well, it goes down and then it goes up.
Well, there's a little dip, but then it goes up.
And then we have, as I mentioned, we have 3 big capital requirements that are on the horizon that's gonna have to fund.
There are possible ones that we need to fund, but the one.
And there might be other ones that we don't even know about.
It could be, but what we know we have to handle, of course, is the library. And in both scenarios, that's comfortably handled.
Yeah.
I think so.
in both scenarios, and you mean in scenario B?
B or A,
Well, the only issue with the scenario B is associated with the library comes all the additional operating costs. And so that's why you're seeing that 0.92%, 0.93% in those out years, because there's no additional revenue coming in to offset that increase in cost. And so that's why we have implemented that 1 cent projected increase in the original plan to account for those additional operating costs that would be coming on board.
yeah. Again, I read, our balance sheet looks pretty flush to a citizen that's looking at it and says, look at this surplus funds. I mean, we've heard it, so I mean, I'm not repeating or revealing anything none of us haven't heard. And so you go into a mode of, you want to have a rainy day fund and you go in that. But when you're getting up to some certain levels, it starts to look more than rainy day, but tsunami fund. And citizens feel, why are you holding on to that? Particularly in an inflationary period.
It's not, in this case, it's certainly not a rainy day fund. We have specific requirements that most of that money is allocated for.
We do.
Yeah.
But we have a requirement of what we have to maintain as a balance. Both, we have a state requirement, then we have our own policy requirement, which goes back to the 30% versus where I'd like to see is just reduce it a little, but,
30% is, in comparison to our peer communities out there, 30% is kind of small.
We talked about this
yeah.
before,
No, no,
and you had a list of, so I don't remember what exactly they were, but
So,
30%
so our neighbors are reserving more funds, is what you're saying? If we're at 38, what are we at? Well, this is,
And we're gonna get to that 70% number, that's kind of high, but it's a very short-term thing, and
I understand.
most of our, if you go back and look at the environmental scan stuff from last fall, our significant peers that we compare ourselves to are in the 60% range.
I obviously, I'm not an elected official there, but I'd be very skeptical.
The smaller the town, the bigger the fund balance, is that right?
The bigger, yeah, because of the risk you're.
Right.
Yeah.
And because you've got fewer dollars
And
to
they all,
play around with.
Yeah.
and they all may not have the luxury of our community,
Mhm.
which it's with its funding capability from a largely single residential community where the homes are increasing in value and we're building 150 homes a year. So where it's, some companies start producing more widgets and produce more units. To increase sales, we are producing, the economy is, not us as a village, 150 new homes a year that are going on our tax rolls. Which gives me the added comfort, in addition to the fine work that we've got here, that we were really in good shape. And so I just trying to.
Yeah. Every one of those homes comes with expenses too.
They do, but you know what, the people are, people buying them pay most of those expenses. Anyway, but one, I appreciate the work. This is exactly what I was looking for, so you can compare year over year over year and compare apples and apples and apples. And there's very little need for even an asterisk on this, because the numbers tell the story, and where there's an aberration, like the 70% number, we understand what that's about. That's that library item there. And but in every single scenario, we are above our surplus policy of 30%. And our estimated operating margin is close. I grant you, it may be what is that? 0.01 higher, or 0.02, yeah, 0.01 higher than comfortable. And you guys are good managers, so I understand where you're at with this, but I just think we are in a spot where we're not taking a big risk at all by making an adjustment to some of what's going forward. And I think the citizens respect that. I think our residents respect how well the community is managed. If they're not getting a tax increase and there's money in the bank, there's no debt, but they also wonder, well, what are you doing with all that?
Let me make one more observation. This is a plan. You're only adopting a tax rate for 1 year. The rest of it's just a plan. If we can perform like we have the last couple of years, then that penny and a half won't be needed. We would be better off making the adjustments when the numbers say we can make the adjustments in a future year, than conversely lowering them because we just want to do it now, and then looking at the number a year from now and then telling our community, we gotta go higher.
Well, okay, that's the alternative view.
Yeah.
My view is I would rather make the case that the situation has changed and we need to raise your taxes. Okay, rather than we're gonna raise them now, sun shining, we're gonna project that we need to raise them. and then, say, hey, guess what, we really need to raise this.
The situation hasn't changed. This has been the plan that's been published
I
to our community for 2 straight years.
understand that, but what's changed is what we just made, what we have is a recommendation, which we're gonna adopt, I think, of reducing the tax rate.
I'm talking about the out years escalation.
Right.
That's been
Yeah,
in the last 2 plans.
Even three, wouldn't you?
Well,
I
next year's increase has been for the last 3.
think you log
For
these,
the
yes.
last couple of years, we have projected that we would have to raise taxes.
Yeah.
And we've been able to,
Make it work.
that's right, and so I think maybe we're getting a little bit of a good reputation for trying to make that, do the best we can. As the numbers come in. And that's good too. I mean, we put something in, we had, this is based on an old 5-year plan. We're not just making up these higher tax rates now.
Based on our best known data
Right.
at this time.
It's pretty clear, we're gonna have some things to spend money on. They're in the budget and some are not, and some are not.
Yeah.
They're out.
And to Jane's point, I mean, I think we've proven that if the opportunity presents itself, we're gonna cut the tax rate.
I concur with that point. I think also you commented about the accuracy of these spreadsheets and the kudos to go to the staff presenting that. It's great. Okay, and I think the plan's work that we have the ability to adjust, I'd rather adjust down than adjust up. And put it in that direction. Again, it's just a plan. So it's just, when people are asking about that in the community, it's just a plan.
But it is something to be able to explain.
And we know we've got the inflation,
And
But there's still risk
which
of
is
it.
a negative.
We also
We're
have the
gonna have
uncertainty of the
somehow.
economy. I mean, if the economy takes a tank,
Fold in.
that upsets a lot of numbers that we'll be reassessing next year.
So I think it's a reasonable middle ground.
Okay, Brooke, I'll make one more minor request now that I know you can do this overnight. And that is to run a scenario where we stick with the tax rates for in the original proposed forecast. And we leave out the carriage tax. See what those numbers.
Okay, and that's very easy to even do mathematically, only because it's primarily just capital costs. It's really just capital costs. So all it would do, it would not affect your operating margin if you leave it in. So you do the original plan, and we can run the numbers on what the fund balance. It would obviously increase fund balance.
So your operating margin would be 0.91 then, still. And you're saying it would, where would it impact the?
It would adjust our fund balance because you would have $3.5 million additional in that fund balance percentage on there. That's the only thing.
So that would go,
So in 27 would be 12 million instead of 8.8 million.
27. Where's your 8?
Oh, if you flip back to the original
Yeah.
one, keeping the tax rates the same.
Yes.
That last year is 10.4 million, then it would be right at 14 million, because it's right at 10.5, and you'd add another 3.5 million to it for the construction of it.
Well, you wouldn't be backing it out.
It'd be adding to fund balance.
Yeah.
I think this was.
Yes, correct. And so that percentage in that out.
It's like 9%, isn't it? Fund balance.
Would be basically 51% in that out year, which would be an increase of about 13%. Based on, yeah, don't hold me to that one. Let me run.
All right, well, go ahead and run it. I don't need it right now.
Yes.
I know I can look
Yeah.
a long way.
The operating margin won't change. It would just be the fund balance percentage that will change. I can get that for you.
Which would increase.
Which would increase, exactly. It would be an increase to the fund balance because you would not be expending $3.5 million in one-time capital. costs there.
All right. Yeah, that would be helpful.
From them to like 12 point something.
In the out years, in fiscal year 27, it would increase to right at 14 million, 13.9.
Yeah. we can explain that.
And if you look at the original proposed, because he's saying keep the tax rate the same as the original proposed.
I'm
ordinance,
saying, yeah, I'm
And add
saying,
another 3.5 billion to fund balance essentially.
thank you, Brooke.
Sure.
Questions on that?
So, we have some more work to do in capital budget.
Yes, it's, so we've talked through these scenarios. That's the last of your handout.
Question, I don't want to.
Yes. Yes.
I just want to go over a couple things in the, in our budget, particularly with airline and track.
Okay.
We'll get to that after we get the.
Okay. Sure. I don't anticipate this. This is the last section that I have planned for you. So the capital improvement plan, if you want to turn to that section, if you'll flip over to page 151, you can see a quick snapshot of the total cost by major area. So 151 on the left-hand side of it, capital projects equate to $7.1 million in the 5-year period. Fleet, the fleet plan is right at 3.8 million total. IT is right at $500,000, and other capital additions are at 10.9 million total across the 5-year period. So if you want to see the details of that incorporated, we do, as I mentioned, we incorporate all the operating costs associated with that. That's included in this section. I won't walk you through that unless you have specific questions related to the operating costs. I'm happy to do that. If you just want to see the big ticket items of what is included in this plan, you will flip over to 157. This is where kind of the detail starts. This is another snapshot of that same capital project fund that you saw earlier for the library first, and then the carriage house. So nothing different there. If you continue to turn to page 159, this is the start of our fleet replacement plan. This is the 5-year replacement plan that is in place for all of our vehicles and major equipment that's maintained by fleet. So this would include obviously police vehicles, our solid waste trucks, any streets and grounds vehicles, any fire trucks that need to be replaced would fall in here. And you can see this, just because we have factored something in the future 4 years, it doesn't mean that we will end up recommending replacement of that vehicle once that year rolls into the budget. At that point, we assess, we go through a detailed process. We review the replacement plan, we review the mileage of the vehicles, we look at the life-to-date repair and maintenance costs on the vehicles to see if we have any problem vehicles that we need to remove sooner. So we do a very detailed analysis of that plan at that time. Any questions related to fleet? Mainly just routine replacements for the most part. If not,
We did.
perfect. Next page, 161. This is our IT replacement plan. A lot of things have fallen off of the IT replacement plan and into our operating budget because we do a lot of subscription-based purchases now versus purchasing software and putting it on our server. So that's why we see this decline. It's not that we are not investing heavily in technology. You just see it on that on the operating side. And then the only major item there would just be the imaging system that Matt talked about with the Birdie, that's related to the Birdie, the document imaging thing. So we have factored in some funding related to implementing some kind of system there.
Now, the sound system got replaced, or, you know, we had that problem a couple months ago, and somebody's chuckling here, so this must still be a project that is some issues. Sorry, in this area.
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
yeah, that's an ongoing saga.
Move on.
I don't think we know the answer yet.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear about that another time. Well, hopefully we'll be able to hear, but.
We have an analog going on in this building right now. It's the backup generator, so we might be coming to you.
Okay.
Well,
We might be able to make it work.
Thank you, Brooke. Go ahead.
Sure. Page 162 is other capital. So it's everything else, aside from anything on the fleet plan and the IT plan. So here's where you'll see building upgrades, HVAC unit replacements. You see the $1 million here related to that library building improvements, initial building improvements potentially. Streets and grounds, see the drainage projects, streetscape, pedestrians. You see those funding items in every year of the 5-year period. Moving on down, you see some items specific to specific departments. So the solid waste glass drop off site, Fair Barn, some replacement of equipment there, and fire has the air pack replacements in their department, along with the air compressor in and out year. Harness track improvements, routine replacement of siding on the buildings or on the barns themselves, stormwater master plan implementation, and to fix some of the land items there. In police, you see the upgrade to the elevator, that's the completing that project. We started it this year. And then in-car radio replacements, these are capital, each individual unit reaches the capitalization limit, we suspect, which is why this item is in capital when the rest of the body cams and things are in operating, because the individual unit cost there. Dispatch radio replacement and dash camera replacement here. All right, if you'll turn the page, that's the remainder of the 5-year plan. You have the public services complex, the location and site plan. So in fiscal year 23 is the potential land acquisition, and 24 is funding for a site plan completion for the property. So currently in the 5-year period, no construction of the facility.
So that means that the earliest, and this would be a stretch, so I'm probably being too liberal here, that we could have that public services complex area that we now maintain in the Village Place area there to be vacated would be FY 25, but it would be more likely be FY 26. Is that a fair estimate?
Yeah, we have not budgeted any funds in those out.
You know, that's what I'm saying. I mean, the reason I raised that is that, I mentioned probably once, maybe twice, that for the Village Place plans that we are discussing, under the umbrella of the small area plans, for us to have a real impact there, we need to have that land vacant. Otherwise, we are bystanders. And we don't have something to offer. We say, well, you know, we'll clear it in a few years. So I think we need to think about that long and hard, because that is the bread and butter of what's often speculated as what's going to happen. And unfortunately, and we know it's 5.3 acres is ours. It's another 3 acres is the county of Moore. And then there's a few, you know, other plots there that use.
And there's also the EMS facility.
The EMS facility, that's, yeah, oh, that's in addition to the,
Yeah.
okay, to the 8.3 acres. Well, you know, if you get 8.3, maybe that's another, I don't know, acre or so, you get 9 or 10 acres. That's an attractive piece of property sitting right down there next to the brewery and behind the manor, for a developer. And for us to be a player in this, because all these successful communities that have a plan and develop something, it always seems to be that the community had some leverage in that process. Right now, we're missing it. So anyway, I say that because I want us to be a player in what happens there. And I think we just need to think about that.
And leverage, we're lacking leverage because we don't have enough,
We don't have anything land,
but we have the facility, we have public services.
yeah, but it's not vacant.
No, but I mean, it is, it's probably where.
It's right, you know, it's there, but it's, you know, if the,
Unavailable.
it's not available. You know, if the dump
Oh, it's
trucks,
under our control.
it's under our control, but you know, as long as we have dump trucks there for the next 3 or 4 years, we can't.
I don't want to outrun our staff capacity, but if you wanted to use some of that fund balance.
Yeah. You know, I haven't written that out of my mind, but I think we're just, you know, I'd like to see us, when we get to the small area plans down the road here, that we can offer something other than hope. And right now, for that.
I'd rather spend the 3.5 million on moving public works than on a carriage.
Oh, so. I agree with that. Anyway, I just,
And part of putting the site plan in, early on in the plan was to create opportunity, if opportunity came. I mean, we would have a site kind of ready to go, we'd have a plan ready to go, we could pull the trigger, it's still gonna take time, obviously, to construct, but that's why the site plan was placed.
and there are discussions going on with EMS in Moore County, chit chat, let's call it chit chat, so it's not nothing
Yeah.
formal. But, something could break, we're in a new era that the economy has entered this what if era, and some communities might decide, hey, we might have to make a change there.
Wayne and I have probably been giving each other breathing room on this because of budget season, but for the water tank property, we should consider ourselves to be in competition with the resort.
Sure.
But I approached Wayne a month or two ago about the possibility of doing a bundled thing. Where we incorporate or build into a plan acquisition of that property, them coming out of the EMS facility and us building an extension onto our fire station 91 that would accommodate their EMS requirements. And they would want to paying for that in a lease. It'd be our building, but they would
And they have a fresh facility.
in a fresh facility. He indicated at that time that they had, at least from his standpoint, he couldn't speak for his commissioners, obviously, but it sounded like there might be something to that, but we haven't fleshed out any details.
It's fair enough to keep discussing it, but that's a scenario that if it worked out,
Yeah.
we'd be a big player then. And we could work with the resort.
Yeah.
Now, I have a few questions about parks and recreation, but more fairgrounds, and page 162, we can use that a little bit. It's one mentioned 21 where they have specific pages, so I think about 162, couple of questions. In the current season, the current harness training season, and leading up to the races, the matinee races and all. There seemed to be, I think there was, and Mark and I talked a bit about this. There was seemingly some increased enthusiasm for the training facility itself, and what we could do to continue to attract more trainers, more owners, more horses here. And I know, Mark, you met with, all through the year, you meet with a whole variety of all the folks down there, our customers. But one of these, some of the projects on this list here for the track and the fairground, or the track particularly, are those the sort of things that will address some of the needs that we have to make the facility more attractive to the trainers and the jockeys and the owners?
I
Do we
don't
need to
see.
go further than that to kind of capitalize on this situation?
Looking here at what we've got. So, obviously, we upgrade barns every year. We replace the siding on the barns, we paint. We do various things like that. We replace windows. That's really more aesthetics than anything, right? And so we're not doing anything that's going to drastically improve the experience for the trainers. When you get to the stormwater, we've got a lot of paddocks underwater. We've got standing water all around that facility.
Yeah.
That's going to have an impact on the trainers, on their day-to-day use of paddocks in the areas around barns. Trying to work on those roads, build them up with more material, provide some drainage areas. That's going to impact them on a day-to-day basis. The improvements to the grooms quarters, we've got bathroom renovations in there. Those are not the nicest places in the world to stay. But we've been trying to incrementally improve those so that it's a little better quality for the rooms that are staying there.
Right.
One of the suggestions from the driving and training club was, instead of spending $7,500 each year to fix up a bathroom or two here, why don't you put that money together and really fix up the bigger barns that have more rooms? that have a common area for appliances, a kitchen area. So we're kind of trying to shift towards that this year, I think, as we get our quotes for projects. And I think that's gonna have a little better impact. Tracks, there's one track in Florida that's closing this year. It's closed, it's done. We have opportunities to get trainers from that facility. We've had a good response so far. We've had a lot of interest. But until we get contracts with deposits, we're not counting on that. We're projecting a modest growth this year. I want to be optimistic and say that we're going to blow past that. But until I have those contracts in hand, I cannot tell you that.
Sure.
So, I think some of the things that we heard this year from the driving and training club were related to patch, related to water, the areas around the barns where the manure bins are. So we've looked at some options for that, and we're going to try to spend some dollars this summer to maybe do a little test site of that if we get approval, so that we can try to make those areas a little more functional for staff in the barns and for our staff to get to clean them up as well. So I think those are the things that are going to have an impact on the trainers and their day-to-day operations down there. Nobody can complain about tracks. Nobody. We set 2 track records this year. We've already had over 40 wins from horses who have left our facility and are racing. So our tracks are phenomenal.
Okay, now, is there, to take advantage of this position in the industry, particularly this location in Florida that's closing, is there something that we should do more urgently, even in this next fiscal year? I'm sure you talked over this through the budget meetings, but is there something we should do more urgently to be able to take advantage, make sure we take advantage of what may be a situation, say, in Florida, to attract those people here? There's something physically to the facilities that we could do 2 or 3 of this year rather than 1. Things like that, it would make the facility look better and would encourage those trainers to come here.
To be honest, I don't think fixing 3 or 4 barns where the manure being sit is going to have an impact on trainers in Florida. They will know that our tracks are here, and we can show them that. It's probably more where we spend our advertising dollars.
Well, that's another point, yeah.
And we did a nice video. We were a sponsor at the futurity races at Lexington at the Red Mile. We got good response from that. We're planning to do that at Hamiltonian this year as well. That's about $5,000-7,000 a pop right there, just to do that.
To advertise the Hamiltonian.
5,000 per facility. So I need 10 new stalls to pay for that essentially this year. And I'm projecting that we're going to exceed that. So certainly there's various websites, magazines that are out there in the industry that we can place ads in. We focused more recently on the Ohio, the Indiana, those areas. But certainly we could look at something that's maybe a little more Florida specific. We look at harness force associations, things like that. And we try to put some things in there, membership booklets, any magazines that they may have. So, but now is the time to do that. Next year is too late. We need to be doing that this spring and early summer if we want to capture them for next fall.
Well,
and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I don't know, is there, what would be the things we should do more of now, right now?
Yeah.
To take advantage of it and to take advantage of the situation that we have, to bring the track to a more profit and loss favorable situation. And,
I think actually, if you talk about advertising, why don't we sell advertising?
Why don't we sell advertising?
Why don't we have advertising on our track?
We could. It's actually something that Scotty and I have talked about.
You mean like billboard, like signs type thing?
Correct.
Where would you put them?
Infield.
Yes.
The infield, so the
Infield
events,
of the half mile.
there's various places. Well, I mean.
sell it for event.
Okay. I'm just.
So when we talk about advertising, one of the places up north, and just put the, they were Pinehurst Track. We do the same thing.
Wait, what kind of advertising are you talking about? You said up north. Are you talking about advertising off
I'm talking
property?
about us selling advertising space for our track. So we had
That's not a source of revenue.
we had the golf cart business.
Right.
Maybe country carriage golf cart sales here in Pinehurst, would like to have had something out there. You give them an opportunity to do that. I'm just saying it's like another source of revenue, but this conversation is probably beyond just the pleasure, with all these lots of, you know, I don't pretend to know the track industry, or anything like that. But the point is well taken, that we need to look at ways to maximize revenue coming from that, because it is a government track. I'm not sure how many governments run a racetrack, horse track.
Careful on that.
Yes. Not a racetrack, a horse track, but
So how
it is many races.
how much more money do you need to improve the facility and how much, I don't need this right now, how much more money do you need to improve the facility and how much more money do you need to promote the facility?
I think we're fine with promotion. I mean, we spend, I don't have it in front of me, wrote 14,000, maybe somewhere in that ballpark. Certainly, I mean, if you spend more, now we're doing this video, we're doing more of the race meet specific versus the print ads. You don't get a lot of traction for print ads. The USTA website, there's a few other websites that are good to place ads at, which we do.
Well, to John's point, you know, you got, you're closing a place in Florida and then you got a place, maybe some riders and all of those people are looking for a place to go. What do we do to entice them to come here, either through improved facilities or improved messaging?
Facilities. I guess I'll just give the direction of the fund in this way. When the council looks at financial statements and we see a loss from one activity or another, we hope that we can turn that around. And there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of times by the staff, Tranquil for many years, looking at Mr. Batten over there, who's got all the history in that in his mind. But if you feel like, I think there's maybe a consensus here, if the staff wants to try to do something right now with respect to the track, to try to gain some additional business, I think the council would generally be agreeable to funding it to some level, but it's up to you to figure out what you want to do. That's your-
Let's go back and examine it. And we may or may not be nimble enough to get it in this plan, but we can always do a budget better.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, right.
Well, something, excuse me, one more thing, please. Mark knows about it. Marty McKenzie's fundraising concert at the Fairborn in December. He intends the net proceeds of that to go only to the track, to pay for items that are not in our budget, like the paddocks and I don't know what else, but I don't know how much it brings.
I don't know.
This is gonna be something new, or he's done that before, Mark?
He did it last year, but it benefited the younger Republicans. This time he wants to benefit the harness track.
Okay, so this is just December.
Yes.
Okay.
I just have one suggestion as you go back and figure out things. If there's something that we can do with this fiscal year money, that we've got some wiggle room with it, that would make a big difference to the harness track effort. Let's do it between now and June 30th. And we can, address other bigger things, the budget amendments for next year. But if we've got some loose change, for lack of a better phrase, and I haven't heard Mark use a large exorbitant number in any of the discussions. So it seems like it's all sort of a practical amount of funds, but let's not wait till next fiscal year if we can do something in the next 6 weeks. That's just my.
I think that's what remember that does have to determine how.
Okay, well, that's right.
Did it send a positive message to any of the first people that were putting more money into it now to make some improvements? Will it make a difference in their view toward?
The easiest and probably best thing we can do, which we've done in the past, is we go to the USDA website. We have them give us every trainer who's based in Florida. We can send them a contract, we can send them a copy of our brochure. You're out $1,000, you've hit how many trainers down.
Great.
I think that's the easy button solution right now, that I can tell you what to do and have that done in the next week and a half.
That's what Mark.
Yeah.
So making immediate improvements is not as profitable as doing what you're saying, doesn't generate.
Physical change doesn't help as much as the message.
Physical changes to the grooms quarters and those living areas will make the biggest difference out of anything we've talked about. Because one, our trainers struggled this year. We had less horses because people could not find help. So if we have a location for their staff to stay that is affordable on site, that would probably help with that. And we have plenty of rooms. We have plenty of rooms that need some work, so.
Yeah, I think the facilities are getting better, but they're pretty dire. And that's a longer,
So that's what
that'll be dealt with soon too, but it's.
We can take the two biggest barns and fix up all the rooms, quarters, and replace the drywall, put in kitchen areas with new appliances and, you know, seating areas, and that's where you're gonna get the biggest bang for your buck.
And does that message get out to the people who otherwise might not come here and have a make it?
So we could certainly make that part of the message.
There's one other suggestion that we've heard from trainers that they think would bring more business here, and that's RV.
The RV hookups.
Oh, yeah, that
Well, that's
was
part of
mentioned.
my question. That's gonna be a tough one, I think, for us to deal with. So if we can improve the facilities, at least for the jockeys and stay in barns.
Yeah.
And that may be helpful in eliminating the problem of creating all the hookups in an RV park, basically.
The
RVs
hookups-
work for
The RV hookups are attractive to trainers.
trainers, not the.
Yeah, not
Not the
their, not their
groups.
staff.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Rooms are the one they're staying in. Yeah.
And I can tell you probably at least 3 trainers who said they would come if we had RV hookups. And we have RV hookups.
Do they have to be on site?
I think in their preference, yes, or at least nearby.
Didn't we talk about this and the issue has to do with visuals and appearances and so forth? And we talked about a way, possible way to make it not intrusive and so it doesn't look like we're running an RV park. So if we can do that, I put me down in favor of it. You know, if it means we can only get 3 RVs, fine. But 3 is more. It's like
Well, they
better
have
than
most
none.
of Barnes
We have
10,
8 to 10 hookups on site right now that are just water and power, but they're right beside the homes, which in a large part is screened from the road. If there's an RV park there, the challenge is that's also where those manure bins are, that's where the shakes and piles are. So, yeah, do you want to park your RV right beside the manure bin? I don't know about that.
Find the best.
But, yeah, there's ways down.
We'll do all that with staff, but obviously there's interest in capitalizing on what appears to be some opportunities in the industry. And then help build that business.
The captain obvious statement is to make it so the race or the horse track is not subsidized by the taxpayers. We come out, people, that's the goal I'm looking at.
Maybe we partner with the resort to offer some golf opportunities to trainers if they come. Yes. So that's a
I
frequent ask
think
too.
one of the things,
Okay.
I think we talked about this really quick, just goes out while we were in the retreat, is we absorb a certain amount of expense related to it being a park across soccer, other things.
Yeah.
So I think we need to bear that in mind, that there is a certain amount of expense that is on the balance sheet for the harness track that we would have if the barns weren't there, but we own the property and ran it as a park. So where is the appropriate amount of recovery, expense recovery that is related specifically to the harness facility, harness operations? It's something that, we should at least bear in mind, that 100% recovery at the harness track. We don't have 100% recovery here at the park. We absorbed the operating costs, we provided it as a park to the public, and it's a cost of doing business to have a park.
Mowing the grass.
There are some similar expenses at the harness track to keep the grass mowed, those kinds of things.
The point's taken, I think concept, each dollar we make off that track is a dollar less we have to charge the taxpayer. Okay? And so we.
Oh, I don't disagree with that, I'm just saying this, I think getting to 100% recovery would be challenging,
Yeah.
but it's an admirable goal to try to do.
Yeah, I
But there would be some
remember-
other ways to have to do it. The harness, the stall rent, in and to itself is not sufficient by itself to cover the 100% of the cost.
So for Patrick's previous conversation at the start of the meeting, let's make it a stretch goal.
Stretch goal.
I may need some planning help to legalize the signage out there and.
Just out of curiosity.
Well,
Is that legal?
I'm a little concerned about,
Long term would be, I think.
I'm a little concerned about the, you know, we talk about the quality of the track. But in my experience too, the infield, which is used by the equestrian community, they're very, they're as interested in the quality of the infield as the harness folks are about the quality of the tracks. Right? And I'm a little concerned, and I did see some of the race yesterday, about all the things that are happening in the infield where the equestrian community likes to rent from us. And then other things that we do there that may take away some of that interest on other parts of the equestrian community, let's say. So, but I haven't talked to them about that. And
Do we have any idea?
What things are we doing that's,
Polo Cross has had some complaints about footing.
That's the big field, not the-
And the mile track.
Right.
And,
it's a mile track. not
Well,
the-
and one thing to keep in mind, neither of those infields have irrigation. So there's no water on those to help them recover. We do fertilize, we do fertilize, we aerate, we're getting ready to do that on the polo field to get ready for the polo cross matches in 2 weeks. So we've got our contractor, they're ready to go. But all of that soccer, all of that lacrosse, rugby, it destroys those fields. And the intent is, once this field is back in shape, we're bringing them back here, we're moving them off the harness track. So you can see that revenue go down. Because that revenue is gonna be in the park.
The game, the soccer.
All the practices and games, it destroys that field. Yeah.
Do we
Now-
That's what.
Yeah, now the show rings are where the horse shows are at, they're not impacted.
Okay.
But when you park however many cars on the mile track for the race of the Pines or for 4th of July, that has an impact on the quality of those fields and that footage.
Do we have any hunch, how many of our citizens know that the Village of Pinehurst owns that track? I'm just curious. I'd be fascinated to see a poll question on that, because I don't think a lot of our citizens know that
Well, I
the village
know.
owns that track.
I've been told that we need to sell it and put condominiums on it.
Well, I heard that.
We're 30 years away from that.
I heard that from,
That was somebody who knows we own that track.
yeah, I've heard that same guy say that. But I just wonder.
I want to avoid the possibility of people suggesting that.
That's my answer.
And I think, I do believe that the equestrian community and the harness racing community are a great benefit to the village and our image. And
Absolutely.
I think that we need to grow to
It
protect
is
that.
part of our heritage. I think it's a part of our heritage. It's been lost.
We can make that a question in our Parks and Recreation Master Plan update survey, to see how many people.
Well, that's what I'm waiting for.
No, it's starting, it's starting soon.
for years. All right, thank you for that discussion on the track. What else we need to do here tonight?
Great, this concludes the prepared materials. We've made our way through the book in a high-level fashion. You all, are free to review the detail and read some of the commentary that goes along with each section there. Just as a quick time check, it is 7:30, it appears. And so that concludes the 3 hours that we originally booked. Of course, we can stay as long as you all would like to continue conversation. So at this point, it would just fall to you all if you would like to continue having a discussion, and if so, on which topics.
Now, you have a couple topics I don't think we touched on, and we can either do it on the 24th, or we can do it on Wednesday. We wanted to talk about turf costs.
Oh, yes.
A little bit. Jeff, you wanted to talk about the inflation assumptions in there. Okay, and Olivia, I think you talked about the walkway fund as well.
Well, that was a simple one. As we put in, as we look at where VPAC wants to put a parkway, a walkway, to say, oh, we only had $400 and that will only get us here, but we need to get here, I would think you come back and say, we need to go from, well, we extend this as far as possible. We need to build a walkway to the extent it makes sense and not limit ourselves because we only have one. If we can budget more, great, but if it looks like what they want to do and it makes sense, it's going to cost a little bit more than 400, we have to go back to this, right? Because I just don't think $400, when did we start budgeting $400,000 a year?
2016.
Yeah, so we're
Well,
6
yeah,
years
then it was
into
put on
that,
hold.
so that, we never adjusted the number, and as we know, costs have gotten higher, so. I don't think we plan a walkway, but end it because we've run out of money. We need to look, what does it cost to extend it to this point that makes
And I
sense?
think these two new projects probably will stimulate some questions for other places
I
as
don't
well.
think they're-
Mackenzie Road.
Well, fine, we're in here right now.
I don't think there was any inflation between 2016 and now.
There was a some.
Yeah, you're right,
It's minor, it was minor.
Well, it took, you know, we spent 400, somebody paid 400 this year right now, and we look at what DFAC wants to do, and that's probably going to cost more than $100,000.
Well, we still have to determine, is that the right spot to, and I say we, I mean you.
Yeah.
Is that the right route?
Yeah.
Do we want to look at other portions of the community that
Yeah.
may be a dissatisfaction as well to see what's the higher need?
For example, I'd like the feedback to go back and look at what the community is telling us about where it could be.
Well, they did it from, they're looking at community, the survey as well, and then they go parking, bicycle and pedestrian master plan, but yeah, they're flexible, they're just so happy to get these walkways in.
Yes.
So you're clear on that question and the turf, cost of the turf.
The turf, this is what I was hearing, but again, it goes to the point, just because we have it in the budget doesn't mean we're gonna do it, but I'm hearing 1.2 million is a whole lot to spend when people are hurting out there. Inflation is from gas prices, food prices, and I think they look at us spending 1.2 million for turf, and that's, you know, I'm hearing some
Well, who are you hearing that from?
public. People who live in Pinehurst, huh? People are paying attention to what we're doing. That live in the public, and they think that with the pinch, the financial pinch, not everybody is weird.
That's interesting because I think we saw the artificial turf as a way to, it was gonna cost something to put it in, but then over a longer period of time, it was gonna pay for itself because it was, we would not have to spend the money for water.
Uh-huh.
And we would not have to spend the money for upkeep,
I agree with all of that.
okay? And it would last quite a long time. And it would allow us to get a lot more usage out of the fields that we have now. So if the issue is, well, it costs a lot to install it up front, but we talked about that at the beginning and crunched it out.
We did.
And it would outpace the savings and the additional usage we would get from our fields. And the extended period of time that investment would be.
And that, maybe that's where the messaging, and I'm not saying take it out of the budget, and this may be one of those things that we say, let's keep it in the budget, but let's just be sensitive to the financial pinch that people are feeling because of gas prices, food prices. And you know, I look at the figure 1.237 million, I go, how old is this figure? You know, we know now the price is just, this is, we're talking about it. The amount might go up. We're now hearing when one of the, I only put out one of the articles and it did talk about there's a
Well,
greater.
that's true, you know, a lot of things, and the prices might go up on just about anything.
Right, so this is a big number and it's petroleum product and 1.2 is 1.8. And again, I'm not saying take it out of the budget. It's just, it was a no-brainer for every reason you just said. It was a no-brainer to me.
And we had $1 million that was kind of a placeholder in the park thing. We thought, well, let's take that million and put it into so it's not like we're coming up with a new money. It's already a placeholder.
I only printed one article I printed. This is they found, this is a study, I guess, in Texas. It said they found athletes were 58% more likely to sustain an injury during athletic activity on our artificial turf. Turf quality has improved, but it's still, the studies are still.
Share that with
I think we
Please.
talked about that too, and there's
He's an
some.
orthopedic.
I know exactly. I'm probably on picture.
Both sides of
Let me
market.
also tell you that
Mark said he also, I think it was earlier today. There's articles there that come down on both sides of that, so read through it and.
Exactly.
I need to be able to read through that.
Yeah.
Lydia, I do thank you for sort of raising this because it was before we were on the council, Jeff and I, but I do recall hearing the discussions last year or the year before. And I understand the logic of saving us costs in the long run. I do, and maybe it's in the material, but you said, I do need to sort of get an understanding, how long does this take do? Is this something that gets done over a week or a weekend?
Roll it out.
It's a 4 to 5 month process depending on design approvals. So if we move forward with this, ideally this happens late fall, early winter, because
You want the fields got
we don't have enough fields right now as it stands, which is one of the reasons why we looked at synthetic so that we could increase our level and amount of
I
play.
understand. So that's an issue.
So the timing of this will be critical because if we do field one at Cannon Park and I do it summer or spring, I've got nowhere to play baseball.
Yeah, I agree.
Nowhere. So we're talking about canceling programs at that point.
Or we look at other communities, if there's some spaces we can borrow, right?
There's
Not much.
not.
But we
Look, yeah.
gotta make an ask, because
That's right.
they come and ask us for things, right?
Yeah, there would be opportunities at schools maybe, but
Yeah.
But yeah, and if you're not sold on turf, I sent you also the other alternative. The estimate we got from McGill on fixing the 2 fields at Cannon, that was 1.1 million.
And fixing means just,
That means grading, fixing, the whole site, and you're putting sod down, that's correct, so.
I'm not, listen, I bought into this for every reason you said. I was totally sold until I started hearing people in the public talking about with the financial pressures people are under, and they look at the village saying, well, why are you spending $1.2 million in artificial turf? And then I started hearing about the knee injuries and what else. And so it's made me think a little bit more about it. So,
well, artificial turf on a field that is usually, 6th graders are playing on, doesn't sound like a luxury. And it is a bit of a luxury. I don't know how many artificial turf facilities there are for 12-year-olds. I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of them and I just don't realize it.
A lot of those studies too, they focus on college professional athletes. I did not see a lot of studies about younger age kids, which is who we would have on our field. We don't have college, we don't have high school, we have the younger age group. So Jeff probably has more insight into that than I do. But
On the studies and stuff like that, first one, you have to go peer review articles that are out there. So they're scientific, you're gonna have all kinds of opinions that are out there. The other part of this is, if you think about artificial turf overall, where it's used in professional ranks, whether it's a soccer field or whether it's a football field in big ones. Let's just throw out a number. Let's say they spend $1 million a year on an athlete for a professional team. They're not gonna put them on artificial turf that's got 58% more injuries. Okay, they're not gonna take the risk. So I ran the human performance program for the special operations, okay, all through the world on this. And we created artificial turf fields for them to do their training on back and forth. And one of the big tenets of this was that we need to keep soldiers healthy. All right, we're not gonna put those fields in artificial turf, it's gonna increase the injuries. And if someone feels religiously about it, that they're gonna have more injuries, then don't use the field.
Yeah.
Okay, but I gotta tell you, the stuff I saw when people talk about turf toe and things like that, most people don't know what turf toe is. Okay, which is basically a rupture of the capsule on big joint of the big toe, okay? Yes, are there different types of injuries that can occur with more predisposition? Sure, but there's that kind of stuff. But common sense, you're not gonna have people investing in these athletes and then putting them on artificial turf. It's gonna cause them increased injuries, okay?
Does
I go to science.
RS have any information on this that help?
I did not see anything on RS.
okay, I just don't know that's okay.
Very helpful comments.
Yeah. I think Karen's-
So that's
I
it for me.
think those were the key issues, but the other issues, so I think I don't have anything to ask unless another council member put us on something we haven't covered yet. This is what I've done several times, conversations, but we're all right there.
Yeah.
Matt?
The only other piece I'll do to wrap it up here is just mention what's upcoming. We do have the budget public hearing will be the next meeting that we'll have on Tuesday, May 24th. The document is available on Engage Pinehurst. If you'll direct folks out in the community to that site, they can comment and voice their opinion there. And then we are scheduled to adopt the budget or present it to you all for adoption on June 14th with the budget ordinance at that time.
Let me ask, one public hearing is at our meeting?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
it's a regular
so
meeting.
citizens will come up and.
Yes.
Oh,
That's right.
And we have a little
Just go.
time
Probably
to
one or two.
We don't try to adopt it that same day.
Right, we've got time.
Gives people
We
an
could, but we ain't got
opportunity,
time.
gives us to, percolate.
Well, May 24th, so next council, there will be a public hearing that day.
I got it.
We might vote on it that day.
Why not?
You prefer the relation?
It's up to you. Several years ago, I think the precedent was that if you felt comfortable, you voted on that day. And about 5 years ago, one or two council members felt whether you're comfortable with it that time or not, it's appropriate to just marinate on it.
Yeah. He likes to say purple.
I would,
And I would just urge that if any council member does have some further questions beyond what we've done tonight, send those to Matt. In the meantime, don't wait for the 24th, something may come up, talk about it on the 24th, that's fine. But then I think the idea is we'll vote on the first meeting of June, as is down here.
I do think we will have obviously some chance to close up on some of these questions and issues on Wednesday.
Well, next one is, I'm not, do we need a
Oh,
Wednesday
we're
meeting?
not gonna, okay. Well,
I don't think so.
In terms of a budget work session, I'm not hearing a lot of other items that need to be discussed unless you all feel differently. It sounds like we've covered the material and given you an opportunity to
Well, I
ask
guess-
questions.
I guess I can, the material that you've sent us Mark, on the turf issue, we can read.
Right.
And we can obviously ask questions in between that. I do think, I understand, what I think is wise, and if we're gonna have a public hearing on May 24th, and we have citizens who go up and tell us something, I think we probably owe it to the citizens to wait for the next meeting to actually vote on something and to say, thank you, then vote on it, without having given some thought to what maybe some very interesting comments or.
So I believe then we're not in need of a Wednesday meeting, is that council's happy with that?
I'm fine.
Happy with that?
Good job, Steph.
Okay.
And Brooke,
Is there another item that needed to be on Wednesday for that?
you're gonna send that other.
So I think we'll-
The other, I'll send you the other
Discussion,
spreadsheet.
Send it.
I'll send it.
on the budget, we'll close that part of this discussion.
Okay.
Is there anything else that needs to be raised tonight by the village council?
No.
All right. Pick up in the morning and other issues. Everybody, thank you very much.
In the morning.
Well, just.
It's not a